Good afternoon, everyone. Although it's a holiday, but I assume that we are joined by most of our regular participants for last 6 sessions so far. On behalf of organizing team, it's a pleasure to welcome you all to this interactive thematic exchange program. We call it Climate Dialogue Series. Just to give you a quick recap, the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change and GIZ India have jointly conceptualized this dialogue series under the Indo-German bilateral cooperation projects on supporting the institutionalization of capacities on climate change studies and action. We call it ICCC. In this entire endeavor, Chase India and AVNV are the communication partners. The purpose of this entire dialogue series is to facilitate an exchange and experience knowledge sharing on research, policy, and intervention in the climate change space, which is available across the globe. As you all know that we formally started this virtual series from April this year with thematic discussions on topics such as mainstreaming climate science in global and local discourse, dialogue on climate modeling, its focus, importance in development planning. We moved ahead with financing climate actions, opportunities and challenges. After that, sustainable mobility, and then climate risk. The recent dialogue, the sixth dialogue we conducted was in a hybrid mode, and it was the thematic topic was renewable carbon and circular economy, where three of our speakers joined us in person in Delhi and five joined us from different geographies virtually. Today, we all are here to have an extremely important and innovative thematic discussion around nature-based solutions for climate change mitigation and adaptation management. In the next 2 hours, we will be trying to unpack this topic of integrating nature-based solutions for climate change mitigation adaptation, specifically around three verticals: science, policy, and practice, with our eminent panelists here. To begin with today's event, it's my privilege to welcome Ms. Ruchika Daral, Deputy Secretary in Climate Change Division in the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. To introduce Ms. Daral, she is currently looking after the matters related to bilateral and multilateral cooperation projects on climate change, supporting the Climate Dialogue series since its inception, planning, and execution. Before Ministry, Ms. Daral has worked with IREDA, which is Indian Renewable Energy Development Agency Limited, and has extensive experience in the field of renewable energy, climate change, carbon accounting, and energy efficiency. I invite Ms. Daral for her address to open the today's session. And sincere apologies, ma'am, that you are joining us while you are traveling on a holiday. But we heartily welcome you to the session. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Meghna. Thank you for that kind words of introduction for me. And on behalf of the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, I welcome all the participants to this seventh episode of the Climate Dialogue series that we have been holding with GIZ since April this year. It has been my absolute pleasure and honor to be, part of this series in the opening address. And I once again welcome all the participants. Thanks for all your time during this session, and also the ones that we have had previously. As you are already aware, that Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change has one of the mandates that the ministry has is for the capacity building of the climate change practitioners across the country. And we have been holding these dialogues on different subjects of climate change that Meghna has already briefed about. Today's particular discussion is going to be on the nature-based solutions, which has gained a lot of traction in the last couple of months, or I would say an year. Climate change, we know that it has been recognized as one of the major global issues that the world is facing right now, and nature-based solutions have potential to address address climate change in the form of mitigation as well as adaptation. So they hold enormous potential going forward. And the nature-based solutions actually involve a range of initiatives that can be taken up while mitigating climate change and also preserving our biodiversity and the natural ecosystems, which need to be preserved in order to preserve the biodiversity that we have on the earth. So we can say that nature-based solution have multiple benefits, and we definitely need to encash or get the maximum out of these opportunities. And it is very important for all the climate change practitioners and also different sectoral experts to get a sense of what actually it involves so that they can take informed decisions in their respective fields. So that is the whole objective of having this particular session on capacity building. I would have been more than happy to carry on in this discussion if I had not been traveling. But I hope all of you get benefited out of this discussion. And I sincerely thank all the resource person, our speakers, and the moderator for taking out time on a holiday for this particular session and sharing your insights into an important subject. And I would also thank all the participants for joining us. And I expect it to be a two-way conversation because the kind of knowledge and experience that we have in the participants is enormous. So the speakers and the participants should have the opportunity of learning from each other. I would encourage all of you to please get benefited out of this initiative and use this platform for capacity building of all of us. And once again, I would thank GIZ, Chase India, and ABNV for conceptualizing these series with MOEFCC and making it a reality. It has always been a wonderful experience. And I would once again, request you to have maximum active participation in the discussion so that we can learn from each other. With these words, I would just wish all the best to GIZ team and wish you a enriching session ahead. So with these words, I declare this event open. Thank you very much, Meghna. Over to you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I mean, for those kind words and key highlights. How it is very important to discuss all these emerging areas and potential thematic sessions around them. Uh, Ms. Daral's inputs have already set the tone for further discussion. Before we go ahead, I just want to share a few house rules. The house rule says, like, we have to keep the camera and mic off for the participants. Please send your questions in chat box with name of the speaker. For speakers, we have planned 10 minutes inputs from each one of you, followed by a moderated discussion. We will also be having poll questions in between so that we can have an interactive session with the participants. To move on, I now invite my colleague Ashwin for setting the context of today's session and would like to introduce Ashwin. He is my colleague in GIZ, works as advisor in climate change and circular economy team. Ashwin has worked in the climate change and forestry sector for the last 15 years. He has worked with governments and communities on developing forestry and land-based climate change mitigation and resilience projects. Ashwin has also worked on some of the earliest forest carbon projects and RED+. He has worked on methodological frameworks on GHG inventories, financing mechanisms, and capacity development activities. And he is an active member for CDM Afforestation Reforestation Working Group at UNFCCC from 2015. He has served in the advisory panels of other international mitigation standards, such as gold standards on climate smart agriculture. I invite Ashwin to set the context for today's dialogue and take the session further.
Thank you, Meghna. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to the Climate Dialogue Series, the seventh edition of the Climate Dialogue Series 2022. Deputy Secretary MOESCC, Ms. Ruchika Dhiral, she has already mentioned the various actions that the Government of India has already taken. In fact, Government of India has been working on multiple actions over many decades now on climate change through implementation of various policy measures, be it SAP-CC, be it NAF-CC, or NDCs. In fact, as we all know, it was just last week that the Government of India approved the enhanced NDC ambitions to be submitted to UNFCCC. Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, being the nodal ministry for climate change, identifies that there's a need to strengthen the capacity of state and non-state actors on climate change actions, help mainstream climate actions. There has been a continued emphasis on developing a systematic and scientific understanding of multiple various topics of on climate change. In light of the above, the ministry and GIZ are jointly conducting this climate dialogue series under the Indo-German bilateral technical cooperation project on supporting the institutionalization of capacities on climate change studies and actions, or ICCC. Chase India and the Avian are our partners in this climate dialogue series. So the critical element that is a focus of this climate dialogue series is equipping or developing the capacities of implementing agencies, government actors, private sector, funders, and communities on how to plan various climate actions, and this in this specific edition focusing on nature-based climate actions. The dialogue series will aims to further the understanding of practitioners on various topics of climate change through dialogues with experts and practitioners focusing on all the three aspects that Meghna had mentioned about science, policy, and practice. So the prime purpose of the series is to start a conversation that would facilitate the exchange of knowledge and promote research, and most importantly, nudging towards further action. So as Madam Dharal had mentioned earlier, we expect this to be a two-way exchange of experiences, knowledge, questions, so on and so forth. As mentioned earlier, we have had 6 dialogues so far on various topics from early this year, and the topics had started from the foundational aspects such as climate science, its local and global discourse, and then climate modeling, its relevance and applications. And then we moved on to other topics such as climate risk assessment, climate finance, mobility, green mobility, and then on circular economy and renewable carbon, and so on. And today's event is on nature-based solutions and climate change. We already had a small context to what exactly NBS or nature-based solutions are. And honestly speaking, it's one of the most promising global solutions which is in front of our eyes. Our lands, it provides an untapped opportunity in both storing carbon as well as reducing carbon emissions, as well as building resilience through the world's forests, croplands, grasslands, and wetlands, and all other land classes that we have. As Madam Ruchika had mentioned, there are 3 ways of how NBS can contribute to our fight against climate change. One could be reducing greenhouse gas emissions, such as carbon dioxide or be it methane related to land use and changes in land use. The second is capturing and storing additional carbon dioxide from the atmosphere or sequestering them in the biomass, living biomass and dead biomass of these land classes. And third one, equally important, which is getting more and more highlighted, is improving resilience of ecosystems and services that they provide, and thereby helping communities adapt to increasing vagaries of weather, be it disaster, be it increases in flooding, dry spells, or any other impacts of climate change that they may face. So NBS can be seen as solutions, centered on ecosystems and their functions and services that we receive or use, as against very specific technological solutions. So it's basically a category of assets in which governments and businesses and citizens can invest, where at the heart of the activity or the design is a nature. And so we've basically placed nature at the center of the societal challenges, be it climate change or biodiversity crisis, or be it disaster risk reduction, food security, or even human health. They are all interconnected. So this, of course, brings immense challenges too, from the actual impacts to potential maladaptation, long gestational period to results to reach the objective. How do we monitor impacts in both short terms and long terms when it comes to nature-based solutions? Mapping causal pathways, what exactly results in which positive result? There are multiple factors involved. Adjustments to implementation design over our years, safeguards, be it social and environmental safeguards that needs to be put in place, benefit sharing mechanisms with communities and other stakeholders. So there are multiple challenges also involved when it comes to nature-based solutions. And added to that, despite the tremendous potential of nature climate solutions, which in fact would deliver more than a third of the emission reductions, which is required by 2030 as per IPCC. The truth is that NBS receives very little climate finance. To the tune of 3% to 5% as of now. A report on the state of finance for nature had reported that if the world is to meet the climate change, biodiversity, and land degradation targets, it needs to approximately 4.1 trillion US dollars by 2050. That's this gap which needs to be bridged. And the current investment in NBS approximately amounts to 133 billion, which most of it comes from public funding, and most of it is basically domestic public funding within the countries, 90% of it within G20 countries, in fact. So to cut a long story short, NBS has a huge potential to scale up. It's very exciting in spite of the challenges. And of course, one of the key aspects is the exponential, non-climatic benefits, co-benefits, or we don't even call them co-benefits today. We call them the real benefits, non-climatic benefits that can accrue, that can flow towards communities from a well-designed, nature-based, climate action. We have a very rich panel today that will touch upon multiple of these questions and angles. Of course, we may have many of the questions, which probably will start with, what exactly is NBS? What is nature-based solutions? What does it mean? What are the implications? What are probably the pitfalls? What are the various, actions which could be considered? So I'm sure in today's discussion, that the experts will touch upon many of these topics, and you'll have answers, insights into many of those questions that you may have in your mind. The dialogues are planned to start from NBS as a solution towards DRR, risk reduction, and then we'll move on to specific examples from various sectors, agriculture and fishery and forestry and so on and so forth. And then also we'll also touch upon international examples and standards and benchmarking, which can help in very robust, very rigorous design and implementation of nature-based solutions. So with this, I would like to hand over the session to our moderator of the talk of the dialogues today, Dr. Dhanashree Jairam, to take it further. And I look forward to a very interesting deliberation. Before handing over to Professor Dhanashree, I would like to introduce her. Dr. Dhanashree Jairam, she is professor at Department of Geopolitics and International Relations and coordinator, Center for Climate Studies at Manipal Advanced Center for Higher Education. She's also a research fellow at Center Mark Block, CMB, and guest researcher at Freie University in Berlin. And this is under the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation, International Climate Protection Fellowship. And she's also worked on as a research fellow with the Earth Systems Governance. She's member Climate Security Experts Network and member Planet Politics Institute. She holds a PhD in geopolitics and international relations, and is also a visiting fellow at under the Erasmus Mundus system at Leiden University at the Netherlands. She has also managed multiple projects on climate change, for instance, on climate diplomacy, sponsored by the German Federal Foreign Office during 2015 to 20. Her primary fields of interest include climate politics, diplomacy, environmental security, and environmental policy in Asia. So looking forward to a very, very interesting discussion on nature-based solutions. Over to you, Dr. Dhanashree. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashwin. So good afternoon to all our participants and speakers in India, and also good morning and good evening to other participants who may be joining us from different parts of the world. Welcome to this Climate Dialogue series on nature-based solutions for climate mitigation and adaptation. So first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to moderate this wonderful session, and also for laying the foundation of this entire discussion. Meghna, Madam Dharal, and also Ashwin, you laid out the foundation for the session really wonderfully. So that just makes my job easier. So now what I'm going to do is first introduce the speakers. So we have a really stellar panel here with speakers with so much of experience and knowledge in this area of knowledge in nature-based solutions, which, as Ashwin also mentioned, there is so much to do in this area. Even the IPCC, for instance, has been dilly-dallying with how to really explain this in the context of climate mitigation and adaptation, how to really implement them at various levels of governance. So it makes it all the more important for a country like India and various other countries to think about this as a long-term and a very promising solution with so much of potential. So this is where this particular dialogue series also becomes very important to actually listen to and also participate in and have this dialogue as a two-way series. So let me introduce all the speakers, and then we will have poll questions so that we also keep it more interactive, as well as already mentioned by Meghna and Ashwin, we will have like a two-way kind of dialogue, so that the kind of participation that we have in the audience and the kind of knowledge that is available, it is all shared between everyone. So we have 7 speakers today, and in fact, all of them have worked in this area for such a long time and have been speaking about the potential of nature-based solutions. We have Professor Dr. Anil Kumar Gupta. He's a resilience and sustainability strategist with around 3 decades of experience in diverse environment, working with the government, corporate, academia, research, and international cooperation. He's a director of Projects and Center of Excellence, Head of Division and E-Learning and Media Portfolio International Cooperation, Technical Advisory and Consultancy Services, and full professor of India's National Institute of Disaster Management at New Delhi. So this is not in the order that they're going to speak, but I'm just going to introduce them first so that we don't have to do this at every leg of the dialogue itself. The second speaker, Dr. Sharad Kannepalli, who's an advisor, climate change GIZ. He is based out of New Delhi. His current work focuses on developing impact monitoring frameworks for adaptation policy documents at state and national level, and implementation of sustainable technological and financial measures to strengthen agricultural value chains as a climate adaptation strategy. We have Ms. Sujana Krishnamurthy, who's an executive director under the Mango Tree. She has 25 years of experience in the developmental sector across the country. Her organization under the Mango Tree is, in fact, an award-winning organization that works with tribal communities in Gujarat, Maharashtra, and Madhya Pradesh, providing training in beekeeping with indigenous bees to enable small farmers to increase their yields due to better pollination. We have Mr. Jyotish Talukdar, who's the founder director, Kalong Kapili. He's one of the founding members of this Assam-based NGO. It has been recognized as brand ambassador of Department of Fisheries, Government of Assam. He's currently the director of this organization and has extensive experience in sustainable aquaculture in Assam, as well as other parts of Northeast region in India. We have Dr. Jyotsna Krishna Kumar, who's a director, community well-being program at Keystone Foundation. She heads the community well-being program at the Keystone Foundation. She works with an interdisciplinary team of practitioners and researchers overseeing implementation as well as research projects. We have Dr. Chandra Silori, who's a deputy executive director at the Regional Community Forest Training Center for Asia and the Pacific, based in Bangkok. He has more than 25 experience, once again, in South and Southeast Asia, developing policy and applying research for participatory forest management documenting traditional knowledge systems, conserving biodiversity, improving the livelihoods of rural people, mainstreaming gender in forest management and conservation, and furthering climate change mitigation and adaptation. And we have Mr. Jorge Matalana, who is an officer in Climate and Ecosystem Services Program and FSC International. He supports the market development of climate and biodiversity solutions from FSC based on its ecosystem services procedure. With a background in political science and development economics and experience in the research and implementation of programs of payment for ecosystem services in Latin America. So as you can see, we have really a rich panel here with experience from different parts of the world, not just India, which also makes it very interesting. Before I invite our first speaker, Dr. Anil Gupta, to share his views and his thoughts and his ideas to this audience, I would like to have the first poll question, in fact, because I think the question here actually also it also kind of opens up a discussion on how really we can define nature-based solutions. What do we see as nature-based solutions in the first place? So can we have the first poll question for the participants of this dialogue? So which one is the example of a nature-based solution here? And the four options: installation of green hydrogen plant in the factory, segregation of hazardous waste, restoration of mangroves to protect coastlines, or none of the above. So it would be great to have an idea of what people think of nature-based solutions and how do we really perceive them in the context of climate solutions. We'll give it a few seconds and then hopefully we can have the results. Yeah, okay. So yeah, 95% of the audience thinks that restoration of mangroves to protect coastlines, that is the right answer. So as you can see, there is a clear understanding and also, what really nature-based solutions mean. But about the implementation, about programming, about planning, there is so much to discuss. I would like to now, without much ado, I would like to invite Dr. Anil Gupta to share his thoughts on this.
Thank you, Professor Dhanshri, for nicely initiating the discussion. And first of all, I would like to compliment Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change. I think Ruchika was here now since he is on travel, so she had to move back. GIZ, which has been my kind of a natural partner in many of the projects within IDM, Avian Chase, and many others. My fellow panelists in this session. The very important thing that how this discourse about nature-based solutions started. I think it's very interesting context, and I have around 7 points, very quick 7 points to share my views on this. So very first thing that if we look at the India's logo of MOEFCC, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. So it says Prakriti Rakshita. It means if we protect nature, we will be protected. So the basic concept of ecological conservation or management of nature itself is related with nature-based solutions to our challenges of the present time. I also recall the big discourse we had organized in Vigyan Bhavan in 2011 jointly with the GIZ and Government of Germany. And we had used the slogan, Prakriti Gyanam Rakshte Jivanam. Means if you know your nature, you can protect your life. And the issues related with disaster management, issues related with climate extreme events are very much related with the protection of life, protection of infrastructure, protection of our assets and economy. So that has a direct linkage. And I think the impetus on looking at nature-based solutions, though nature-based solutions, this title came little later. Initially, it was ecosystem services, then ecosystem-based adaptation and ecosystem-based DRR. But I would refer back to the 2005 report of Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. So that was the first ever global report that referred to this. So this was a kind of a genesis of the global discourse on looking at ecosystems to find out the solutions of the present day crisis. Then the fellow panelists and also the participant must be aware of the very popular term nowadays in the domain of disaster management, that is ecosystem approach to DRR. So in the short, we call it eco DRR. And that's very interesting to share that this term eco DRR happened to be coined by me in a meeting in UN campus Bonn in 2010. So this is a journey of around 12 years. And now we have numerous agencies and people across the world working on ecosystem approach to DRR. So within 12 years time, it has really got good impetus and recognition. And the reason is that we have realized that there has been irreparable damage to the ecosystem services, irreparable losses of ecosystems. And that is also reflected by that everyone has witnessed that continuous slowdown of economy, that globally there has been an economical slowdown, and that has direct linkage with the slowdown in the ecosystem services or ecosystem productivity. Then, as we talk about IPBASE, which is an organization that develops standards for NBS, nature-based solutions. However, I have a little broader perspective because I say that when we talk about promoting nature-based solutions, it should not be always bound with scientific definitions, but rather applications. Because ultimately, we are looking to promote nature-based solutions to address the current day challenges of people, of infrastructure, and developmental settings. NBS case studies, NBS examples from the European world, from the developed countries were well reported. However, there has been significant underreporting from the very good examples and very substantial kind of case studies or case stories from the countries like India and other countries of Asia Pacific. So we under IUCN and with partners, we took an initiative and brought a first ever compendium. It is, by chance, it is in my hands, and it has been published last year by Springer, and there are 42 such case studies from Asia Pacific that shows that how we have good examples. But yes, the question is that we have examples, but the problems are so vast, and the geographical the challenges of climate extreme events, challenges of disasters are so diverse that we will need to look at promoting NBS through some kind of a mission mode initiatives. And how do we replicate? How do we upscale? I think that is very important aspect. I would also refer to the 2019 14th COP of UNCCD, United Nations Convention on Climate Combating Desertification, that India hosted in New Delhi in July. And one of the very important aspect that all the leaders, we agreed that now we will have to plan and act for releasing land back to nature. And how do we do that? Basically, it is just a synonym to nature, promoting nature-based solutions, because we will have to redesign the entire development. We will have to think of redesign of our buildings, redesign of our infrastructure, because at a time when people want to grab more and more land, if some people decide, our leaders decide that we will have to start releasing land back to nature, I think it is a great dichotomy. But there is no excuse. We will have to think. We will have to work on that. More so, this is also the UN decade for eco-restoration. And this is also a reiteration because we need to restore something which is already lost. It means that is a global realization and acceptance that the ecosystems are significantly lost. And that is the reason now, in fact, we are looking at the nature-based solutions, because that is also a very important question. I think we should have asked in the beginning itself that why are we talking about NBS? Why do we really need NBS? Just for promoting NBS, or do we really have some other kind of agenda, or in other terms, hidden agenda? Yes, we have hidden agenda. Basically, we are looking for our own safety. We are looking for our own welfare. We want to achieve better economy. We want to achieve sustainable economy. And for that, in fact, we have to look at nature-based solutions, because nature-based solutions offers the most sustainable, most viable, most acceptable solutions to the present day challenges that the climate change and disasters are posing. So that's very important. Uh, Here we have also to see now that if we really want to they replicate and upscale the NBS based strategies, we will have to find out more and more effective and broader pathways and entry points across all the sectors. So at present, we have very good pilots, but that is not sufficient. That is highly inadequate. And recently, just one example, we are trying to identify and work out on those kind of examples. For example, the looking at Manregs, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, and the states like Kerala, where they have urban Manregs also. So how this kind of large schemes where large number of people are associated, can we include the ecosystem services based interventions as for employment opportunities? And that has been done. So there are numerous such examples, but Manregs is one. We have to start looking at other sectors as well. We have to look at the entire cycle of development, entire project cycle, and see that where are the entry points for promoting nature-based solutions. Recently, just yesterday only, we released a publication on climate proofing disaster response, relief, and recovery. This is also my hand in hand. So here we have seen that during post disaster recovery, how important it is to look at nature-based solutions. How do we, when we are the planning our development after a disaster has already destroyed everything, or destroyed partly or fully the development, how we take care of the nature-based solutions, and how do we rejuvenate and recreate ecosystems. So that's very important. And a recent initiative at global level where IUCN, IPBES, UNEP, and many other partners are working, the red listing of ecosystems. So that is, I think, I would like to refer very important initiatives, because for quite a long time, we have been focusing only on red listing or the identifying the threatened species. Now we have to start we have started looking at the ecosystem as it is, because if ecosystems are threatened, then there are so many species, so many other systems that are also getting threatened. So that's very important. Recently, we have also done some kind of a policy analysis of various sectors. For example, where are the opportunities in water sector, rural sector, panchayati raj sector, or urban systems, and many other sectors to promote the nature-based solutions. And we have published that also. And if any other kind of forum, so we will be sharing those case studies also. The last point, it's very important that when we are talking about promoting nature-based solutions, two contexts we have to keep all the time in mind. One is people, second is economy. In the countries like India, if we just talk about conservation as a kind of a emotional aspect, or just the ecological dimension, we would not be able to drive the support that is actually needed. When we talk in terms of public welfare or sustainability of people, and also how it can support the nature-based solution can be good support to restoring our economy, or the low, particularly at local level. So I think that's very important that we relate it with the economic rejuvenation, or the reducing economic slowdown at local level. I think that's also very important. And the last one, before I close, that how do we look at the industries or the corporate sector? Corporate sector participation would be very important. And then the state programs and schemes. Various states have several programs and schemes. For example, there may be schemes related with Ayush Mantralaya. There may be schemes related with the health ministry. Can we look at and can we find out some kind of opportunities even in the Ministry of Housing schemes when we talk about the green buildings? That is also an avenue for promoting nature-based solutions. So I think we have huge opportunities. We will have to work together, and we'll have to really look at these opportunities and promote NBS so that we can really reap the benefits. Otherwise, having few excellent pilots and few excellent stories would not really change the scenario, because even if we talk about India is a huge country, huge geography, diverse challenges, 1, 2, 5, 10, 500, these kind of pilots are not really going to work. We need to have to cover the entire country. So if not entire country, at least 30% of the land, 20% of the land, and see that how NVS can be promoted. So thank you very much for inviting me to share some of my thoughts. And over to you, Professor uh, uh, Lakshmi, for taking the agenda forward.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gupta, for that wonderful insights that you provided, starting from knowing your nature, which is so important to survival and welfare and well-being, to talking about the 12 years of journey with Eco DRR, and also talking about the challenges that India faces when it comes to finding or implementing effective pathways across all sectors when it comes to nature-based solutions. And also, thank you for also pointing out the roles of different actors, which is also very important to lay down, right? So including corporate sector, states, which also have a stake in how climate change action plans work. So this is a very important part to remember when we talk about nature-based solutions. We have some time for maybe 5 minutes to take a couple of questions from the participants or any insights from the participants in response to what Dr. Gupta mentioned. So I open the floor for questions or comments from the participants. You can also type your comments in the chat box and questions in your chat box, and I can take them up with the speaker. Okay, I don't see any hands raised at this stage. Maybe I will, okay, I see one hand raised. Ribu Dio, if you would like to go ahead with your question or comment.
Yeah, hi there. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Absolutely wonderful briefing about nature-based solutions and the historical timelines with regards to the etymology of nature-based solutions. So my question is somewhat with regards to the greenwashing aspects of the nature-based solutions from the corporates. So see, we have developed an understanding, and on a larger scale, we have developed an understanding that afforestation in each and every case is nature-based solutions, which essentially it's not. And we have seen national level campaigns promoting afforestation and in areas. So I'll just give an example to put things into perspective. So there are pristine grasslands, riverine grasslands in India, which are being turned into woodlands in order to promote and in pursuit of carbon enhanced carbon sequestration. And since those grasslands and such areas do not have a legal protection and notification in order to identify their ecosystem services, so have we is have are we seeing a shift in understanding from ecosystem services to nature-based solutions, which is largely promoting corporate interference and somewhat changing the ecosystem landscape altogether? And how what is the role of now what comes the role of MOFCC to intervene and to ensure that there is some form of integration with regards to the ecosystem identification and the do's and don'ts with regards to nature-based solutions?
So Dhanshri, you want me to respond?
Yeah, I think you can respond. After that, maybe we can take two questions together and wrap up the session. Yeah, please.
Okay, so I think the point is that has been raised very important. And since Ruchika is not here, she is from MUF. It would have been good to for her to respond. But anyway, I'm also nodal officer for MOEFCC, so I am aware of certain things. The very first thing that they when we talk about ecosystem level interventions or the value of ecosystems, these have local governance dimensions, very important. By sitting in the capital or in a federal structure, looking at small ecosystems, only at the federal level we can enable policies and the schemes to look at it. I do agree that grasslands are the other common property resources are very important from the ecological point of view also, as well as the needs of the communities also. And that is the reason now they in all the districts in the country are have been asked to develop their environmental action plan, so that the identification of these common property ecosystems and other kind of ecosystems can take place. So very first thing, I do agree that one thing is that mapping, that where are these resources, what are their values, what are their conditions. If they are mapped, so that has the initiative is already going on. Some of the districts and many of the states have already come up with some kind of draft plans. First time these plans are being developed. So that will also give a good opportunity for synergy with the climate change adaptation plans also, because now we had SAPCCs and now we are wanting that districts should also come up with the district adaptation plans also. And alongside that, all the districts are legally required to prepare a disaster management plan. And very interestingly, though the title is disaster management, the disaster mitigation, where we say the disaster risk mitigation, is nothing but basically a sustainable development plan or the climate change adaptation plan. So there is a huge opportunity for having integration and synergy. And the last point I would like to thing I would like to add here, that we cannot have an umbrella opinion saying that grasslands are more important or the woodlands are more important. Basically, the local perspectives are always important, because even if we are inducting any kind of species, so if that is an exotic species or the species brought from somewhere, sometimes we have no other option than to bring the other species. For example, recently I have been visiting Leh Ladakh, and there are very few native species. So certainly we will have to experiment that what else can survive, particularly when we have to revegetate the denuded areas or the denuded slopes. So we will have to make a scientific assessment and planning based on science. Last point, we will have to take care of the common property ecosystems as well. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll take two questions together and so can answer them both. So Shaikong and Deepanjana. Shaikong, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Thank you. Uh, Congratulations for the nice presentation. So really happy to hear your presentation. My question is that you have already said that in India, the nature-based solution is very less adopted by the people and by the government also. But in my opinion, a lot of potential for this. We need exploration for this nature-based solution. So will it be linked with a traditional knowledge or indigenous knowledge that retain in the local population, or should we need redevelop new innovation development is required? Which one is more important in this area? My question is.
Thank you. I think you have answered also. I think both are very much required. We have lot of treasure in our traditional wisdom, and but we will have to look at the traditional wisdom that is available, because those are in this scattered form. There are excellent traditional wisdom in our northeastern states. Different kind of wisdom lies in our coastal areas. So we will have to see that where this traditional wisdom is linked with the nature-based solutions, both ways. One is that harnessing the nature for protection against the climate extreme, and second thing, that where we are also providing back to nature, because there are two things. One is that we can keep on exploiting. The second is how are we planning to return back also. And when we are talking about replicating the things, then the use of modern technology, innovations would be very, very important, because if something has been done good in some districts of Upper Assam, and if that is applicable somewhere in Meghalaya also, I think the technology, recent innovations, initiatives can help. So basically, we will have to blend both, and that is what the recent science, technology, and innovation policy of the country also says, that we will have to look at the modern technology, but we should not miss out the benefits of traditional wisdom. Not only traditional wisdom, the local initiatives also, or local innovations. Maybe 5-10 years, some local initiatives have come, and we have witnessed to that. So thank you very much for pointing on this.
Thank you.
And
Thank
thank
you.
you,
I'm
sir.
very grateful. That is why I have seen a lot here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
May I ask my question now? I'm Dipanjana.
Yeah, okay, if you can be quick, so that
Yeah.
because we have 6 more speakers, so please be quick. Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
Maybe my question is a bit early, but thanks to and congratulations to MOFCC for organizing this workshop on a very pertinent issue, that is nature-based solution. And if you look at our West Bengal, the observations we have seen for the adaptation, we have included the nature-based solutions because we have the Sundarban over there, and it is not only that the 95% goes whole for everybody agrees that mangroves are a barrier. The nature-based solution can be implied in many other areas like river floodplain zone and the wetland conservation. But my question is now for this mangrove part only, that if we look at after this Glasgow last time, the COP, and this nature-based solution has started getting the traction, I can find in many international scientific community has already started working and development of building codes, just like it has been done in the case of reinforced concrete. Now, how the mangroves are really actually contributing in withstanding the sea level rise and surges. So the body like ASC and they are now developing this, working on this, analyzing this mechanistic codes and developing the building codes. So this, I believe that it will help also us, this kind of approach, to select and finalize that how we are going to the strip plantation, what should be the tire of mangroves to save our coastline. So if any such initiative, because this has to be taken only at the central government level, so if any such steps are now being taken, sir, that's I want to know.
Yeah, again, very important. So I will be a little quick in responding. The Indian standard institution, I say under the BIS, BIS is developing adaptation standards.
Yes,
So within adaptation standards, NBS is one. NBS is already one, and now under that, the building codes are also being revisited to see that how the greening the buildings can help adaptation. Though the initial thought is adaptation against the increasing risk of heat wave, cold wave kind of things, but I would refer to that when we are talking about any kind of building codes. The building has to be resilient for all kind of things. We cannot have a separate building code to be resilient for heat, separate for, because if there is a building located in the somewhere in Chennai, it will be prone to heat also, it will be prone to cyclone also, it can be prone to tsunami also, it can be prone to coastal flooding also. Basically, we will have to see. So that is little complexity.
So I just want to correct myself. It's not only the building code, I am talking about the structural code. I mean, the civil engineering code, where we decide about that how our embankment is going to be, we are going to the entire thing. I mean,
yes, that is being looked into, and very important point that you touched upon. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So I think there are many more questions. I see more hands raised also. We can take them later on after all the speakers have completed their presentations. So I would now like to invite our next speaker, Dr. Chandra Silori, to share his research and his thoughts on nature-based solutions. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dhanashree, for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to be here to be part of this important dialogue series. being organized by the ministry and GIZ. Thanks as well to Dr. Gupta for setting the scene here. In fact, his presentation was very useful in the sense to to highlight some of the conceptual ideas, some of the policy issues and challenges that are around the nature-based solutions. One thing which I would like to basically tell here to everyone is perhaps nature-based solutions is not something which is new. I mean, these are the things which have been in practice for ages together, basically. Yes, there are new challenges, new forms of issues which are emerging, and therefore we are all talking about it, which is good point about it, basically, that we are getting more interested about addressing some of these challenges using nature-based solutions. But I think idea here is that how can we build on what is already there? Somebody talked about the traditional knowledge system, and also I think there are a lot of knowledge which is already existing, and we should really make sure that how do we make use of the knowledge. My presentation will be focusing more on the practice side of the nature-based solutions, taking the example of community forestry. I mean, it's known by different names in different parts of the world. I will be citing some of the examples from the Southeast Asia, a couple of countries where I have been working, my organization is working. But before I move on to actual topic, let me just briefly talk about RECOFT. And RECOFT stands for Regional Community Forestry Training Center for Asian Pacific. It's about 35 years old organization, which pretty much focuses in Asia Pacific region. We have, in the map you see here, the 7 countries which are our focal countries. 5 of them include the Mekong region countries, Indonesia, and 1 country from South Asia, Nepal. And reason for that is because we focus on community forestry, and Nepal has been one of the pioneering countries for developing community forestry, and therefore it's more for kind of learning ground for us. At RECOFT, we aim to create a future where people live equitably and sustainably in and besides healthy forests, and we take a long-term landscape-based approach, an inclusive approach to support communities to secure their land and resource rights, stop deforestation, build alternative livelihoods, and achieve gender equality, and address the climate change-related challenges as well. And community forestry, as I said, is one of the core strengths of RECOFT, and that's what is also one of the entry points for us to actually do our program planning and do our activities on the ground. So just to briefly talk about what exactly is community forestry, I'm sure many of you know about it, but it's a very broad term which is used for explaining the approaches that empower people to manage, benefit, protect the local forest areas. And these approaches have different names in different contexts. Someone called it social forestry, village forestry, participatory forestry, community-based forest management. In India, we call it joint forest management, or people-centered forestry. So there are different ways, different form of this community forestry in different parts of the world, basically. And it includes a variety of institutional arrangement like indigenous management, sacred sites of cultural importance, direct community control of management, forest areas, small-scale forest-based enterprises, and all these different forms of participatory forest management are in existence for ages, in fact. So these itself is one of the nature-based solutions. That's what I'm trying to basically present here. It is, it maintains healthy and resilient forest and sequester carbon, support community and ecosystem adaptation mechanisms, offers varieties of opportunities for local communities to generate income, and also, promote equity, locally accountable governance, and also empowers communities to exercise their rights. Basically, that is how we see community forestry, how we practice community forestry in some of these countries in the region here. Now, how community forestry is a proven nature-based solution, basically. So this is something, I'm trying to give you some examples of, bringing some examples from few countries here to explain, how community forestry is one of the nature-based solutions. So recognition of the capacity of trees and forests to deliver a wide range of benefits or nature-based solution is not new, as I said earlier. And this has been, in existing. In Asia Pacific region particularly, community forestry in this part of the world, particularly here, it is expanding very quickly. There are, governments are putting their targets to really double or triple their areas under community forestry because they realize that the participatory way of forest management is one of the effective ways of forest management, in fact. And then it has, as I said, in last few years, the area has doubled in the region here, and we could see about 30 million hectares of community forestry by 2030, which is nearly 5-fold increase in last 20 years. So that shows how much attention government is basically paying to the community forestry expansion in here. So some of the couple of examples that I said I'm giving you about how community forestry has really contributed to nature-based solutions. One example I'm bringing it here is from Nepal, basically climate change mitigation and adaptation example. We know that community forestry is a strong vehicle for nature-based solution to climate change, for adaptation, mitigation, and social benefits. And as I said earlier, we take a landscape-based approach to climate change adaptation. This is an example of one of the villages in Tarai region of Nepal called Bishnupur, where it is located in a very highly conservation, highly sensitive Chure area, Tarai range. We have noticed a gap in gender inequality in the village there, which was basically because of the water insecurity, water scarcity in the village, where women have to spend extra hours to collect water. And also, poverty is widespread in the region here in the village. Reliance on the cash crop is quite heavy, and which makes them more vulnerable, particularly because the farm productivity is declining. And the climate change impacts have been witnessed in the form of flash floods, droughts, fires, or irregular seasonalities and falling of the groundwater table. And the village lost about 30 hectares of land due to riverbank erosion. So what we did is that we initiated a program called Trees and Bees, which is basically distributing fruit trees to local villagers. Again, based on their priorities, consulting them and then identifying what are the best species to grow, and then also distributing honeybees. So that's what we call Trees and Bees program, which has basically helped local communities to adapt to the climate change, and that led to the income increase of nearly 18% of income was increased for the villagers. Also, some of other initiative, for example, well boring, which was to irrigate the sugarcane crop, which was again done in consultation or in partnership with the local municipality. Also stabilized the river bank, about 1 kilometer river bank was stabilized, which was in fact causing a flash flood or loss of agricultural land, which we used bioengineered gabion boxes, plantation of bamboo species along the banks, and that really helped local communities to stop the erosion. Community cohesion, building the institutions, mitigating tensions over the water access among the communities. We empowered women. In fact, fortunately, this particular village which we selected is all women-led community forestry group. Basically, women are managing the whole community forest area. So we build their capacity of the women, and they basically emerge as climate adaptation champions. Climate sensitive community forestry operation plan was developed, and which have been mitigating about 900 tons of carbon, and 39 communities in 3 districts are now replicating this program basically. So this is one example from Nepal. Also another example of how community forestry could play a transformative role during COVID-19. So one example, we did in fact this case study in all 7 countries in the region here with support from FAO, and focus was how community forestry can increase the people's resilience to the COVID-19 induced restrictions, and why recovery plans should strengthen community-based forest management. So this was a report that we launched about a year back. This was done as I said, in all these 7 countries. We selected about 14 different sites to do the field data collection. And then, we did interview with 400 plus people, and then we gathered information. But just giving some very, very key findings of this report is that, community forest communities, what we found were very, very helpful during the COVID-19 restriction, because they improved their patrolling of the forest area, and all illegal harvesting, poaching, and encroachment was controlled to a large extent. What happened during that time? That when people lost their job in the urban centers, many people went back to the villages, and then they were dependent on the forest resources and all. And there are a lot of illegal activities also happening during that time. So community forest committee was very instrumental in stopping these activities. Also, what we found that, personal savings from the sale of timber and non-timber forest products from community forest areas helped more than 3 million people in lower Mekong region to cope during the first few months of the lockdown. So that saving, which came from the, forest product sale, was very, very instrumental for, coping with the crisis which suddenly emerged, and people were not really ready for that. Community forestry committee were able to mobilize external support during the pandemic. In fact, they were able to reach out to different, organizations, donor agencies, and all to support the support to gain the support financially or technical or capacity building support, or all the other hygienic things during that time basically. And the response to the pandemic was influenced by rights, resources, and capacity. That was another finding. Not all the community forests responded in the same way, obviously, because in some cases the rights were given to the local communities to manage the forest, but in some cases there were no land rights given. People were using the resources, but their rights were not really secure, but were not given by the government to them to manage or to own that area as one of the forest areas, basically. So these are some of the findings from the pandemic case study that we did in a few countries. Another example is from Myanmar, where how one particular community forest area which really helped managing this situation during pandemic. Community forest management committee operated revolving fund of roughly about $4,500, which was they were able to generate, and that fund were crucial to really support local communities to distribute safety kits and all to the local community members, and all the preventive materials, COVID-19 preventive materials. That was very, very instrumental in during that time itself. Community forestry user group networked with charitable organizations to raise financial support and distribute loans to its member when they lost their income or jobs in the market. So the community forestry saving was very, very instrumental that time. Another example comes from Cambodia, where community forestry credit scheme is currently operated. We started that scheme in 2014, and it's a new way of financing community forest management activities. So now there are 100 plus community forestry groups which are functioning with this kind of credit scheme, and across different kind of community management, community forest, community fisheries, or community protected areas. So all these community members, community groups are in fact operating this credit scheme, which is roughly about, now they have a capital of $522,000 capital, which is benefiting about 4,103 people in these through these schemes, which is more than 50% of those beneficiaries include women, which are most marginal group of people basically. So investing and additional investment, they were able to use this capital is for patrolling services to stop illegal activities in community forest area was one of the higher priorities, and particularly during the pandemic time. So there are few examples that I kind of share with you. To conclude, what we propose that community forestry integrates solutions to health, social, and environmental challenges in a holistic way, because it rests on the basically the locally based institutions. Community forestry can make forest communities strong, as we have seen some examples here, and become resilient centers of a flourishing nature and circular economy. And community forest management plan need to be adaptive to changing context and challenges and opportunities, as Professor Gupta was just mentioning earlier. All these local level or district level plans need to be really responding to these new challenges, new mechanisms. And the key challenge, but despite all those, the example that I explained to you, I shared with you, there are some challenges still remain, in terms of the quality of the community forest land, what generally we see. And we have seen the examples from India as well, where joint forest management area, JFM areas have been in very, very poor quality area, which hardly yields anything. And we expect local communities to really make those lands productive. So, that's one challenge, quality and quantity of the forest land given to the local communities. Tenure security. I mean, people may have a resource used right, but not necessarily tenure right. So they are always in a dilemma. Anytime government might take the land back. So that is another challenge. Unaddressed community needs, or there are range of community needs which are still unaddressed. How can we make them part of the community management plan? And social inclusion and participation, of course, it is one of the important areas that we need to make sure that everybody gets benefit of all these interventions, nature-based solutions, or any other climate change mitigation, adaptation related challenges. So that is it. Sorry to take a few minutes over, but this is what briefly about how community forestry can play and can be an instrumental to address some of the nature-based solution challenges. Basically. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Silori, for that great presentation, providing us cases from so many different contexts, from Myanmar, Cambodia, Nepal. So that just gives us also a better idea of how nature-based solutions are being implemented, especially community forestry projects are being implemented in other parts of Asia as well. So we can take one question maybe, because we are slightly running out of time. One question, if there's any question for Dr. Silori right now. I don't see any. Okay, Sagar Gohil, if you would like to go ahead with your question for Dr.
Yes.
Silori.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, my question is related to solar energy sector. So the question goes like, can solar energy sector in India, by providing clean, sustainable energy to meet the energy needs of rural people in India, can actually help to protect our forest trees from getting cut down for firewood? So can this solar energy sector be one of the solution to indirectly protect our trees from getting cut? Thank you.
Not really sure if that question goes to me or to Professor Gupta, but I can definitely quickly react to that. Yes, I think solar energy definitely has this potential of bringing down some dependency level of local communities on the forest who use firewood for cooking and all. That definitely has the potential. And I'm sure, in India, particularly as I see it from far, basically government of India is taking huge initiative in the solar energy sector for sure, and going to be becoming one of the leaders, I would say, in the world as far as the solar energy consumption is concerned. So I'm sure Professor Gupta can react to more on that, but this is what my quick reaction. Before I hand over to Dr. Gupta, I see here one quick comment here from Dibyendu Sarkar about the joint forest management. Absolutely right. Yes, Aravari Forest Range is one of the first examples of joint forest management in India way back in 1970s, early 70s all. And I think that was the time when, in fact, Nepal and Philippines were some of those early countries where these joint or participatory forest management models were taking shape and emerging, in fact. Other countries in the region here, like Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar, even Indonesia and all, these are the countries where these kind of participatory approaches have started quite late, almost a day, 1 or 2 decades late, and therefore they are still in very, very early stage of using this as one of the approaches for forest management.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Silori. We can take more questions later on.
Sure.
And with that, we will invite our next speaker, Ms. Sujana. But before that, we have also another poll question for our audience to participate in. Can we have the next poll question? Do you think nature-based solutions are a potential approach for enhancing the health of our ecosystem? Yes, no, or no idea. So if you can vote any of the options here, and we can have a quick show of result in the next few seconds. Yeah, so 100% of our audience believes that nature-based solutions are a potential approach. So that means at least there is consensus on the idea that this is something that we need to scale up further, as the previous 2 speakers have also mentioned in their presentations. So without wasting much time now, let me now invite our next speaker, Ms. Sujana Krishnamurthy, to share her ideas and also about her organization, which has been doing some wonderful work in this area.
Thank you so much, Professor Dhanashree. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to request Alak to please share the presentation. Keeping with the tradition of polls, we generally do a small quiz. So since the chat box is open, I was wondering if some of you would like to see what is the difference between these 2 thalis that you see over here in front of you. Quick responses in the chat box, or at least think about it. for 2 seconds. What's the difference between these two thalis? Diversity, most nutrients, natural processed. Okay, great. I think we do have a bunch of nutrition related suggestions here. But to move on to the next slide, actually what you see is what the world would be with bees and without bees. Bees, as most of us know, are excellent pollinators. So without bees, we would have only wind-pollinated crops, which are primarily cereals, bread, rice. 4 out of the 5 foods that we eat, vegetables, fruits, oil seeds, pulses, you see dairy, chocolate, all of this would not be on our plates if it were not for the pollination impact of bees. So that's the quick message in terms of what we are trying to convey to you today. And I represent here the work of Under the Mango Tree Society, which is based in India. And over the last 12 years, we've been piloting a very innovative program, which works with indigenous bees and smallholders. So in the next couple of minutes, I'll try and tell you how this has impacted smallholder communities and create climate resilient strategies for them, while at the same time putting more bees back into the environment. The next slide, Alak, please. So this is what we're going to be talking about, beekeeping with indigenous bees, which is a very valuable tool for climate change resilience, especially for smallholders. In the Indian context, 86% of our farmers are actually small and marginal farmers. And you'll see in the next couple of slides how this has impacted their lives. When we first started working Under the Mango Tree Society and talked about bees as a pollination input, people thought that we were quite crazy because the common person generally associates bees with honey. But in fact, in 2016, the FAO put out this policy statement, which has been a shot in the arm for many of us who are working on pollination aspects, where it talked about pollination services as an agricultural input. So it's not just soil and water, which are important for agriculture, but pollination services which bees, as well as a number of other insects and birds provide. Honeybees are the most efficient pollinators known to humans. So that's where the context of this is. The FAO also drew this link between pollination services and smallholders, where it talked about improving pollinator density, basically putting more pollinators in the environment, as well as widening the extent of pollinators that we have in the environment, how it has a very important role in achieving the SDGs, as well as adaptation to climate change. So this has been a very critical input in natural resource policy. And that's where a lot of our work also stems from. So why are pollinators important? We saw how important they are for our food systems, but we also know that 90% of wild flowering plants depend on pollination. We also know that food and habitat and other resources for a wide range of species depends on pollinators, the world's most important cash crops, leading exports, biofuels, fibers, cotton and linen, as well as construction industry, which depends on timber, all depend on pollinators, which makes them very crucial for biodiversity. This comes from the IPBES report. And as many of you are probably aware, the IPBES report also pointed out that pollinators are in decline across the world. Unfortunately, there's not been enough research on this. Subsequently, in 2018, a group of researchers, including Dr. Parthiv Basu from the University of Kolkata in India, also documented the kind of challenges that pollinators faced and why was there a decline. One was deforestation and habitat loss. The other aspect was the wide use of pesticides in agriculture. So these were two very important reasons which are contributing to the decline in pollinators. And that's something that policy in India probably needs to take into account and work towards in the next couple of years. In India, we have some data in terms of the kind of impact that can happen in agriculture as a result of honeybee pollination. These are figures from the National Horticulture Mission, which kind of tell us the yields which are possible. And in India, in fact, the first National Commission on Agriculture in 1976 had pointed out that pollination was 40 times more important than honey for agriculture. So what do we do at Under the Mango Tree Society? Our mission is to promote beekeeping with indigenous bees. And here I'd like to make a critical distinction as to why indigenous bees are important. Indigenous bees are very local to our ecosystems. They are present, they are hardy species, and they are easily available for small farmer communities. They need not come from outside, which is why it's very important that any policy that looks at pollinators should have indigenous bees at the heart of it and not hybrid species of bees. So this is something that we at Under the Mango Tree Society are very clear about. And our focus is to promote beekeeping with smallholders, primarily to increase productivity and enhance incomes and protect the biodiversity for smallholders across the country. So like I mentioned earlier, the framework in which we operate is the focus on indigenous bees. We work with honey hunting communities and smallholders across the country to help them transition into using bees in agriculture. Couple of slides later, you'll see how this has impacted their agriculture, both at the macro level as well as the micro level. And also, like someone had mentioned earlier, conservation by itself, if it is standalone, it does not get you the kind of impact if conservation comes with economic benefits. So that is what we are trying to do here by creating a system of livelihoods and income increases, thereby showing that conservation with an economic angle has the ability to reinforce the conservation message in the community. So what our work does is that if there are 10 farmers in the village who take up beekeeping, it's a very high impact activity because for every beekeeper, there are 2 plot neighbors also who benefit from improved pollination cover. So for example, if there are 10 beekeepers in a village working with indigenous bees, it improves the pollinator population for the entire community, thereby improving their pollinator cover. The other interesting thing is that the IPBS report also points out that beekeeping done sustainably has the capacity to impact 10 out of the 17 SDGs, which as an activity is a fairly large impact. This is a quick overview about where we work. We work in the 3 states of Gujarat, Maharashtra, and Madhya Pradesh. And we've impacted close to 105,000 families in these 3 states so far. Like I mentioned earlier, awareness on pollinators is very critical to conservation. So because we work with tribal communities in these three states, like it was mentioned earlier, they're generationally very familiar with honeybees, or bees as such. But what they are not sure is that how can these bees be sustainably kept? So for example, most communities have never seen a bee box. So we harness the traditional knowledge of bees and channel it into sustainable beekeeping. So for us, a critical message here is spreading awareness about pollinators in the entire village. So we've had examples where villages have taken, once you highlight the connection between bees and agriculture, entire villages have actually taken pledges to stop honey hunting. So this is extremely useful in putting bees back into nature and ensuring that bee populations thrive in these areas. Here you can see some pictures of the farmer training and the way that we do it. If there are any questions on this, I'll take this later. Next slide, please, Ella. Another critical component that we work on is that of bee flora. So what bee flora does is that because it combats deforestation in many of these areas, by putting back indigenous saplings as well as adding a small component in terms of trees which are pollinator friendly and crops which are pollinator friendly, like bottle gourd, rich gourd. So what this happens is that it creates an additional stream of income to these families. And a critical innovation here, for example, which you'll see about later, is the use of gray water, for example, water for bathing or washing utensils, along with kitchen gardens that you see in the photos, along with the bee box, has had the potential to increase incomes for these families, which has become a very important climate resilience strategy for smallholder families especially. Next slide, Anna. Here you have a sense of what beekeeping for a community can do. You can see the increase in yields for mango and bitter gourd, cashew. All of these are cash crops in some of these areas. So vis-a-vis the increase in yields for a beekeeper group vis-a-vis a control group. So this kind of increase actually helps improve incomes for subsistence farmers. Here again, you see the kind of difference in yields which is possible due to beekeeping for a beekeeper in a pre and post bee box situation. Again, mango has improved. You can see a whole bunch of vegetables, pulses, cash crops, oil seeds, all of them have seen an increase, which leads to larger incomes from for the family, as well as more bees in the environment. You have two small case studies here. This is Pariben. She is from a village in Valsad block of Gujarat district. So her family were honey hunters, but since the exposure and awareness on bees and beekeeping, they've given up honey hunting entirely. You can see the small increases that have happened in her agriculture. To us, they may be small, but for someone like Pariben, it's quite a lot. If they're able to increase the yields of nagli or ragi, for example, from 30 kgs to 50 kgs, it means that the family is able to sell the surplus yields in the market and earn an income for it. So this actually improves the climate change resilience of many of these BPL, below poverty line families. This again is Santosh Tai. She's from a village in the Palghar district of Maharashtra. Another person for whom kitchen gardens have helped her add a whole bunch of new vegetables to whatever she's growing. And this has given her, it's a very innovative strategy, because what this has done is that it has improved food security for a family like that of Pariben. So this has been very critical in terms of adding bees plus kitchen garden plus grey water, which has been a very innovative strategy in many of these areas where nothing used to grow in April and May, which practice only one season of agriculture. So this is just to give you a quick overview about our work. I'd be happy to take any questions on this.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for that great presentation. Also showing the successes in terms of awareness creation, in terms of training, in terms of harnessing traditional knowledge systems, as well as contributing to food security and livelihood security and various other sectors, which is what this makes more and more important to, as many others mentioned about scaling up as well. There is time for one question. Indrani Fukan, if you can ask your question, please. Indrani, we cannot hear you. Okay, I don't think. Yeah, there is a question
from Maulik that I can see here while Indrani comes in. Yeah.
Yes.
So yes, the increase in production is keeping all other things constant. So which is why we look at a beekeeper group and a control group. So the only introduction that has happened with the beekeepers is the addition of 2 bee boxes on a 1 acre piece of land.
Okay, I would like to again see if we can get Indrani to ask a question. Okay, okay. Maybe later on, Indrani, you can also type your question. If it's not possible to ask it directly, you can type your question in the comments box. In the meantime, let me invite our next speaker. Thank you so much once again for your presentation, Ms. Krishnamurthy. Now I would like to invite our next speaker, Mr. Hore Matalana, to talk about his ideas and his experiences with nature-based solutions from Latin America. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for the invitation to this event. I'm very happy with all the insight and all the connections that we'll be able to see once I show you a bit what we're doing at FSC International. Could you please pull the presentation? I can also share it if it's necessary. That's fine. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. As I was mentioning before, I work at FSC International, and today we would like to show you a bit of how we understand forest stewardship and how we understand it as a nature-based solution. And for that, I'm going to go through 4 elements. First, I'm going to explain a bit about how we understand forest stewardship, how it connects to the global discussion of nature-based solutions and the role of forest in climate change mitigation and adaptation. Then I'm going to go through the how we see the climate crisis or the solutions to the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis, and how that connects to the concept of forest stewardship. Then I'm gonna show you a bit of how we are understanding the solutions we're offering. How is it that they can be implemented at the forest level, and basically in a very streamlined way how it works at the forest level and how the verification works at the forest level. Please, the next slide. So the first point is that we, FSC stands for Forest Stewardship Council. And this is for those of you who are not very familiar with the organization, we have been around for more than 29 years, providing a system that values the stewardship of forests, that somehow reflects the true value of forests and the work of forest stewards in the ground. But then the first question becomes, what is a forest steward? Who is a forest steward? And that relates to the fact that there are people living in the forest around the world, caring for that forest and living from that forest. And that has several possible models. So the first one is the very classic one that we understand as the forest being a source of products, be it timber and non-timber. So for that, we offer solutions related to verifying the supply chain and making sure that this is obtained in a responsible, sustainable way. But there is also a type of stewardship that is more related to the conservation of the forest, to the conservation of those values that the forest give. And for these, we offer a model that we connect with key organizations that help us maintain that forest value. And in the third model, in our understanding, it's also in the stewardship towards restoration. And that relates to one of the questions in the previous made to Dr. Gupta, which is how is it that we can ensure that this restoration is actually improving and is not simply changing land use in a negative way. And that is where we actually provide tools to show that restoration is respecting biomes, is respecting local ecosystems, and is also improving the livelihoods of those forest stewards. And this is reflected upon our whole system. Our system of certification works in such a way that we're a nonprofit organization. We're membership based. So our membership, which is global, gives us some indications of how we should see forest stewardship and how we should implement it on the ground. But then the implementation and creation of standards happens at the national level. So all our standards for forest stewardship are national. And in the case of India, for instance, we recently created, after 5 years of consultations and work with a very complex technical working group, we release a forest stewardship standard for India, specific to the practices and type of forest in India. So that's the way we implement our principles and our understanding of forest stewardship at the local level, at the national level. But then this connects to the whole conversation of the climate agenda and the climate and biodiversity crisis. Please, next slide. Which is, how is it that we understand the climate crisis, and how is it that our tools are somehow aiming at solving or mitigating the climate crisis? So our first understanding is that we need massive changes globally. We need to promote those changes if we are to avoid the worst effects of a climate crisis. The second one is that, of course, forests play a key role, and this is kind of a truism. We all understand that. But at the same time, what is not usually reflected is that it's not only the forests play a key role, but that people within those forests play a fundamental role that we need to keep on highlighting. And the problem is that we, in our understanding, this has not been communicated enough. This has not been implemented enough, and in the different tools and implementations that we have seen in the ground, which has kind of halted that potential of the forest, but rather contributed to the global problem, because at the end of the day, the forest sector, the land use and forest sector is actually contributing to the climate change by providing at least 10% of the global GHG emissions, which is incredible, seeing this potential that forests hold. But again, for us, since we're not talking enough about the value of forest stewardship and the need to drive further incentives and resources to those forest stewards around the world, the problem is being increased. So the way we want to solve the problem, or we want to contribute to those solutions, is fostering a system of forest stewardship around the world that rewards better, sustainable, responsible forest stewardship, rather than forest degradation or land use change and so on. So how is it that we're doing this? How is it that we are implementing our solutions? Please, next slide. What we offer is a system called ecosystem services verification, which is deeply connected to our current system of forest certification. So in the traditional world of forest certification, a forest steward on the ground, depending on their models of operation, will certify that their forestry or their activities are compliant with the different indicators or factors that we put in our standards. So we understand that those standards provide a lot of safeguards in terms of a stakeholder consultation and so on. Leveraging on that system, we're giving a tool to forest stewards for them to verify the impacts, the positive impacts of what they do. And those impacts are related to what you see below, which is the impacts in different ecosystem services. We created 5 categories of ecosystem services that can be verified. It can be biodiversity conservation. It can be carbon sequestration and storage. It can be watershed services, so related to the water basins and so on, soil nutrition conservation, and recreational services. And these points towards a point that was made earlier, and is the fact that we cannot be understanding nature-based solutions that's measured simply by carbon sequestered and stored, or reduce emissions and this kind of thing. We need to understand the full value of forest, or the true value of forest, in a more holistic way. And this is the reason why our tools are pointing towards the verification of how forest managers, in different ways through their different activities, are impacting positively the provision of these different ecosystem services. But this is the one side of the equation. So once a forest steward has already verified their positive impacts on ecosystem services, how is it that these contribute somehow to what we were saying before? We were saying we need further resources for forest managers. The mechanism we want to activate is to connect with interested stakeholders around the world. It can be the corporate sector, and that relates to the previous question as well. but also can be other stakeholders such as non-governmental organizations or even the government itself, because it provides a tool that says, you know already that that the forest management in this particular area is impacting positively. You need to incentivize this. The mechanism we're activating here is saying, we're gonna make you create this connection to these different interested stakeholders in such a way that both sides benefit from this connection. Please, the next slide. So in a very streamlined way, how does the process look like? At the forest level, a forest manager quantifies their impacts on carbon, on biodiversity, and so on, and they generate what we call an ecosystem services claim. This is the tool that says you can make the communication about these positive impacts, and then they can connect with an interested partner, be it companies, be it local governments, be it non-governmental organizations, and so on. And they connect with this and they say, or we help in that connection, and we say, this is the proof that shows that this positive impact is happening on the ground. If you want to contribute to these practices, you have here the evidence to be part of that positive impact. Then there is an agreement within these two actors on how much that the retribution should be for the implementation of positive activities at the forest level. And finally, what they do is they reward both parties, because on the one hand, of course, the forest managers will have a better case for their current management, but at the same time, companies will benefit from very solid data that they will be able to communicate and integrate into their climate strategies. And in this way, we're also trying to put a bit more of responsibility, especially we talk a lot about companies here, because we're putting a lot of the responsibility on the companies. Our global understanding of the climate crisis also entails that there has to be a lot of commitment from companies to decarbonize and to reduce their impacts, but also to contribute to positive activities. And this is only one tool into that whole logic of connecting and engaging more the corporate sector with very clear tools and very transparent tools in such a way that they really foster positive activities. And at the end, we contribute to bigger nature-based solutions from the forest all around the globe. So I think that's it from my side. So please, I'm very open to answer any questions that are. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jorge, for that presentation, giving us an idea of incentivization, which is very important for nature-based solutions to really work on the ground, and focusing on responsible sourcing, conservation, restoration, also looking specifically at the role of corporate sector, which is one of the questions, in fact, raised in the comments section. Also, if you see, this is a question that has been asked by some of our participants as well. So let's open the floor for questions. I see one hand raised, Deepanjana Maulik. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question? Or Jorge?
Yeah, just a quick question that since you are working on this certification of ecosystem services and verification, and also certifying this carbon sequestration and storage. So is the certification by CCS can be used for also carbon credit, earning carbon credits? Your certification?
That's a very good question, and that's an important difference to make. This is not you can talk a lot about carbon credits and so on, but I'll just try to make a very short difference. Carbon credits work in what we call beyond mitigation, beyond value chain mitigation. So those represent actions that are done by someone else elsewhere, and companies claim as theirs by buying an asset. But what we're saying here is you do not need necessarily to go beyond your value chain to actually claim positive impact. You can claim here, you can contribute to positive actions here with this verification, but that doesn't entail that this verification becomes a tradable asset, which are carbon credits. So this is just a way to sponsor positive actions from the corporate sector, but without buying an asset that automatically the forest manager loses all right to claim as theirs, but rather as a way to contribute positively to those actions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deepanjana, for that question, and thank you, Jorge. Ashwin, do you want to ask a question now, or would you like to ask probably afterwards?
Oh, I can ask later.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So we can have a round of questions later on as well, so that we can at least finish all the presentations for that. So yeah, thank you, Jorge, once again. And let me now invite our next speaker, Dr. Sarath Kannepalli, for let me invite him to share his presentation and his work in this area. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Dhanashree. Let me share my presentation. Can you please confirm when you see the presentation?
It's visible.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me today here. I'm Sarath Kannepalli. I'm an advisor with JZ India in the climate change team. Today, I'll be talking about nature-based solutions in enhancing agriculture's resilience to climate change. So quite a number of speakers have spoken about nature-based solutions in forestry. So slightly different sector in agriculture. This is a slide where I wanted to highlight why nature-based solutions or interventions are required in agriculture sector. So this is a slide showing the relationship between agriculture and climate. So they have a reciprocal relationship. Agriculture is both a contributor and also is adversely affected by climate change. So unsustainable agricultural practices release several GHG emissions, whether it is carbon dioxide, methane, or nitrous oxide. And also, as you can see on the pie chart on the right, it shows the contribution of agriculture to greenhouse gas emissions globally. It's around 24%. Agriculture, forestry, and other land use sectors contribute around 24% of GHG emissions. And when it comes to India, it is between 15 to 20%. Agriculture and other allied sectors. When you look into all of them, it's around 15 to 20%. And also, agriculture is one of the most climate sensitive sectors and is adversely affected by climate change. And there are several studies highlighting this climate sensitive nature of agriculture, such as for 1 degree rise in temperature, there is a 3% decrease in paddy yield. So that's one stark outcome that has come out of this climate change and agriculture. And also, as you can see on the top picture, this is not a picture of birds, but it's a plague of locusts. I think it's in early 2020, before the start of COVID. I think March 2020, there was a plague of locusts that has traveled from North Africa to Middle East and to Pakistan and to Rajasthan, and finally reaching even to southern states of India. And there was quite a bit of alarm around these locusts affecting crops in several parts and states of India. And the main reason for this proliferation of these locusts is this untimely and very untimely rainfall in some of the deserts, and that has made the conditions quite favorable for these locusts to proliferate. So, this is one important or one eye-catching news item that has given much importance to how a climate change, how agriculture is directly or indirectly affected by climate change. So based on the above, so these observations summarize the importance of mitigation and adaptation measures that need to be taken into consideration in agriculture sector. So this is a slide showing India's total national GHG emissions from crop production by crops and by state. The bar chart on the left tells you that rice contributes over 52% of total crop related emissions, followed by wheat, cotton, and sugarcane. And these five crops actually contribute more than 80% of total crop emissions in India. And these high emissions from these five crops is mainly due to the resource intensive nature of production practices for these five crops. And the map on the right shows the states where you have the highest greenhouse gas emissions. Andhra Pradesh, the combined state of Andhra Pradesh, the Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, followed by Maharashtra, West Bengal, Madhya Pradesh, and Punjab. They have the most greenhouse gas emissions in the country, and the higher total emissions in these states is mainly due to larger area and under crops in these states compared to other states. So here I have summarized few challenges faced by farmers because of climate change. This is increased use of fertilizers due to decline in soil quality. So all of them have a relationship to climate change, and these are caused due to climate change, like increased irrigation prices due to reduced water availability, increased use of pesticides due to increased pest attacks, increased costs of cultivation mainly due to greater volatility in input costs and also agricultural production prices, and also debt burden due to crop failures. And in addition to these, to meet the growing food demands, farmers are encouraged to look at ways to increase crop production and at the same time mitigate greenhouse gas emissions and also adapt better to climate change. So nature-based solutions are one way to look at it, because there is quite a bit of talk about side effects of green revolution. Of course, green revolution has satisfied food security at some point, but the side effects of green revolution are quite stark, and people are looking to move away from green revolution practices in agriculture to something more sustainable. And nature-based solutions in agriculture has caught quite a bit of interest. So this is a definition from IUCN on the nature-based solutions. As you can see in it, the focus is on both on human well-being and also biodiversity benefits, not just economic and environmental benefits. So benefits of nature-based solutions include resilient agricultural production, and it contributes to climate change mitigation and also enhances nature and biodiversity. So this is an interesting slide here. If you look at the graph on the top right corner, it tells you the different kinds of nature-based systems based on human involvement. For example, the nature-based solutions can range from preserving existing natural systems to slightly managing or modifying ecosystems to a completely new or novel or artificial systems. So nature-based solutions can range from something that is natural to completely new. For example, I can give an example. For example, a constructed wetland where the level of human intervention and ecosystem transformation is high could be used to address a local water quality concern. Whereas protection of an intact ecosystem, if you can, could be adapted to generate climate, biodiversity, food production, and human health benefits. As you can see in the yellow circle on the graph on the left side, nature-based interventions in agricultural production states, such as conservation agriculture, cropland nutrient management, improved rice cultivation, trees in cropland are at a stage of managed or restored ecosystems, which lies somewhere between a natural ecosystem and a completely artificial ecosystem. So, so, so we need to adapt agricultural practices that can mitigate greenhouse gas emissions and help in climate change adaptation. And at the same time, it should help in conserving or preserving food security. India has, there is a study that has shown that India can cut 18% of its annual greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture while maintaining yield and profits by following three measures. These are optimum fertilizer use, water and moisture management, and an adoption of zero tillage. And some of the nature-based solutions that can achieve these three measures are: for optimum fertilizer use, planting legume crops, mulching, use of biochar, incorporation of trees into croplands, and intercropping can help optimize fertilizer use, synthetic fertilizer use in agriculture. Similarly, for cultivating cover crops, mulching, use of biochar, and incorporating trees into croplands help in water and moisture management in agriculture. And adoption of zero or low tillage practices conserves soil moisture, improves soil health, and reduces GHG emissions in the soil. Similarly, regenerative agriculture comprises a list of practices that includes several of these that I just mentioned. And regenerative agriculture practices can be considered as nature-based solutions because many of its principles and practices align well with nature-based solutions. And another form of agricultural system, that is climate-smart agriculture, can sustainably increase productivity and income and improve resilience to climate change, and at the same time reduce GHG emissions. And several nature-based interventions are also part of climate-smart agriculture practices. So these are some of the practices that are that have been there for quite some time, but they're not being practiced on a large scale, and they can be brought back into mainstream agriculture practices that would help in both adaptation and mitigation of agricultural practices. At the same time, it can conserve productivity. Briefly talking about some of the practices or case studies that are currently in practice in India. So one good example of nature-based solutions in agriculture in India is the community managed natural farming in Andhra Pradesh. It was started in 2015, and the initiative is currently being practiced by 138,000 farmers covering 150,000 acres across all 13 districts of AP. And the aim of this initiative is to enroll all the 6 million farmers and farm workers in the state of Andhra Pradesh and cover all crops by 2027, and complete the transformation to community managed natural farming across the whole state by 2030. And community managed natural farming is a low input, climate resilient type of farming that encourages farmers to use low cost, locally sourced inputs, eliminating the use of artificial fertilizers and industrial pesticides. And this practice is based on 9 principles of natural farming that I have listed here. And so it includes several of the nature-based solutions that I talked as part of regenerative agriculture and also climate-smart agricultural practices. And also, in addition to these 9 principles, it also has 4 aspects that are integral to this. And these include use of cow-based or organic, I shouldn't say organic, but natural inputs to the whole initiative. And one important distinction between organic farming and this farming is that these organic inputs are not being used as fertilizers, but they're being used as stimulants for native microbes to improve the soil health and improve the productivity. So when they are being used as microstimulants, they're used in very small quantities compared to when you use them as fertilizers. So Bijamrutam is a microbial coating of seed using cow dung and urine based formulation. And this is used for better germination and immunity during critical stages of plant life. Jivamrutam, it's a concoction made with cow dung, cow urine, jaggery, pulse flour, water and soil to multiply soil microbes. Similarly, mulching is meant to improve soil health and preserve soil moisture. And Wafasa is a soil humus buildup that happens because of the above three principles. And this leads to enhanced water vapor condensation on the soil surface, providing irrigation. And the picture on the right top shows banana crop intercropped with pumpkin and drip irrigation. And the bottom picture shows preparation of Bijamrutam. So some of the results that I could glean from their website are these. The 4 kinds of benefits that are being quantified are that they are targeting to quantify as part of this initiative are the direct benefits to farmers from this initiative. This includes estimating that additional income of $15 billion over next 10 years, including savings of $5 billion through avoiding synthetic chemicals. Ecosystem services, this need to be quantified through instruments like true cost accounting, and savings for government, banks and insurance companies from better resilience to floods, cyclones and droughts. This also need to be quantified. And avoiding subsidies, savings of $4.9 billion in fertilizer subsidy over 10 years. Studies showed savings of 30 to 40% in water usage and electricity used for irrigation, resulting in a saving of 2.4 billion years over 10 years. And the table on the right top shows cost of cultivation between farmers who are practicing CMNF, community managed natural farming, to non-CMNF farmers, and percent increase in net income for intervention farmers compared to non-intervention farmers for a variety of crops ranging from paddy, maize, black gram, and green gram. The percent increase in net income for intervention farmers ranged from 25% to 54%. And the bar chart below shows costs of cultivation, gross income, and net income for a subset of socially disadvantaged farmers and women farmers practicing this intervention. So this is quite a large-scale intervention, and it has been even quoted by the finance minister in the last finance budget, and the government of India has been encouraging this natural farming throughout the country. So this is a success story that that I wanted to present. And the second one is this is something that we at GIZ climate change team are trying to. This is in an initial planning stage where we are planning to diversify crop diversification to more climate resilient and profitable crops such as medicinal and aromatic plants in Bundelkhand region of Uttar Pradesh, the 7 districts of Bundelkhand region. And Bundelkhand region, the 7 districts are known to be, have been identified as the most vulnerable agroclimatic region in terms of climate exposure, sensitivity, and adaptive capacity. So the National Medicinal Plant Board is trying to bring 800 hectares of land along the Ganga River under MAPS cultivation. And also the Ministry of Food Processing Industries has identified turmeric in Lalitpur district and basil in Jhansi district under one district, one product scheme. Most of you might have heard about this ODOP scheme, where the government is trying to focus on few districts where certain crops are grown extensively, and they are trying to provide support right from production to post-production stages. So these medicinal and aromatic plants have been identified as target crops in these Bundelkhand districts by the central government too. So So some of the economic and adaptation benefits we expect to achieve as part of these initiatives are higher value and demand. These have higher value and demand than conventional crops, and they're less resource intensive compared to conventional crops that are being grown in the region. And integrated cultivation of medicinal and aromatic plants with agroforestry, intercropping, crop livestock integration provides diversified livelihood opportunities. And these plants are known to be more resistant to droughts and pest attack. So we are planning to focus our attention both at production and post-production. At production stage, we plan to integrate this medicine and aromatic plants cultivation with agroforestry, intercropping, crop livestock, and micro irrigation. And also we are planning to introduce renewable energy in different production stages. So this is something that we have been planning quite some time, and we have been involving. It's a multi-stakeholder initiative that involves both government and non-government and private sector. So in summary, so nature-based solutions in agriculture are cost-effective interventions that can enhance resilience, mitigate climate change, and also improve the environment. The producer, the farmers have a critical role in implementing nature-based solutions. And also policymakers can enable the implementation of NBS through law and regulation, economic incentives, capacity building, and communications. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sharad, for that interesting presentation on the agricultural sector, on different forms of nature-based solutions within the agricultural sector. So since we are running out of time, maybe I will flag the third poll question for the day while we also take one question for Dr. Sharad, if that's fine. So the third poll question for this particular session is, can we have it on the screen, please? Yeah, this is a third question. Do you think NBS is a significant component for achieving net zero by 2050? Yes, no, or no idea. Considering also that India has released or is ready with its NDZs, right? So, so just one question, which I think is also relevant in the context of urban agriculture or urban farming practices, which has been, I think I saw a few questions related to urban settings and examples of nature-based solutions. So Dr. Sharad, if you can quickly answer this question from Soham Sarkar, where would Miyawaki method of forest creation, which aims to quickly raise indigenous plant species, which also sort of resemble natural forests, fall within this scale? And I think it also kind of nicely ties to one of the comments raised by Dr. Chandra. He says about how we must not, we must avoid segregating sectors into forest and agriculture and other land-based activities, considering we need to treat them in an integrated manner. So we also have the results for poll 3 right now in front of you. As you can see, 91% of the audience says yes, it is a significant component. So thank you for participating in all the 3 poll questions. So Sharad, can you quickly answer that question? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So this Miyawaki forestry, it's one type of integrated farming systems. So it's an agroforestry system. So one major concern with agroforestry systems is the delay in returns. If you plant trees in an agroforestry system, so how long will it take before you can actually reap benefits from it? But the advantage with Miyawaki forest systems is that you plan that in such a way that you plant such a tree species that the yield or the returns are much quicker compared to normal forest species. And this Miyawaki forest system is something that has been that is being encouraged by Government of India, and this is being encouraged quite a bit in the state of Uttar Pradesh too, quite intensely. And there are quite a bit of trainings that are being done to support this Miyawaki system. So this is definitely a good integrated farming system model that can be practiced all over the country. I don't know if that is what he was asking with that question. Is that a good model? Is that what he was asking?
Yeah, that he just wants to know how can you place it within the context of different ecosystem conditions, and how does this actually help, fall within the scale itself. Yeah.
There is quite a bit of knowledge on what tree species to be included and how they can be the production aspects that are involved in that. So there is quite a bit of knowledge in that, and it is quite a well-developed production system.
Yeah, all right. Thank you so much, Dr. Sharath. We will move on to the next speaker. We have more questions for Dr. Sharath, which we will come back to at the end of the session. So we have our next speaker, Jyotsna. Yeah. Jyotsna, can you hear me well? Yeah, okay. Yeah, hi. So our next speaker will also be, I hopefully will also be giving insight into some of the initiatives of our foundation as well. Yeah, over to you.
Thank you. So I guess somebody will be pulling up my presentation from your end. Yeah. So it's almost good evening now. Well, very happy to be here representing Keystone to this dialogue series, and would like to first of all thank all the organizers for putting together this panel. Honored to be very part of this sort of wonderful group, and it's been really interesting listening to everyone and learning quite a bit about the exciting and interesting work that everyone is doing. I guess for my presentation today, I'll be talking mostly our experiences on climate change in the NBR, NBR being the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, and our efforts in implementing what we think are nature-based solutions, and some of our learnings and insights from implementing some of these approaches. Next slide, please. So very quickly about the organization. Well, the organization is Keystone Foundation is a non-governmental organization, and started in 1993 by three founder directors, Snehlata Nath, Pratim Roy, and Matthew John. And they started with a interesting survey of the beekeepers and honey hunters in Tamil Nadu, and eventually in 1995 decided to sort of establish base in Kotagiri, where they continued working with tribal communities, indigenous communities on various aspects of their life and livelihood. And over time, these interventions have evolved into different programmatic and thematic areas. And yet, conservation, enterprise, and livelihood sort of continue to be those three key pillars on which a lot of Keystone's interventions sort of continue to build on. And we've been sort of working in the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve for now almost 30 years, where we continue to work with indigenous as well as non-indigenous communities. And perhaps most of you know of what the NBR is. This is a map of the NBR. It's the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, one of the first biosphere reserves created in India. And what is unique about this is that it cuts across three states of India, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and Karnataka, into sort of a single geographical block with very unique socio-ecological characteristics, and almost a melting pot of complex land use dependencies, socio-cultural linkages, multi-stakeholder governance arrangements, and so on. Considering that this is a very important socio-ecologically relevant landscape, in the last 2 decades, we've also been seeing a lot of drastic sort of land use changes happening in the in the NBR, and this may have to do with the sort of the beautiful landscape. It attracts a lot of tourists and visitors from the plains and from the nearest cities, and therefore we see the kind of land use changes, the increase in built environment, the increase in ecotourism operations, and so on, and simultaneously through our interactions with the communities here that we've been working with, through practice, through research, through observations, what we have also seen is that the local communities here, particularly the indigenous communities, their association with the forest, with the natural resources, with the landscape, is very deeply embedded in their traditional knowledge and practices, with a sort of significant influence on their overall well-being. In addition to this, we also see the sort of the disruptive influences of external variables, like both socio-political variables like market fluctuations, changes in forest governance arrangements, weakening of property rights, and particularly relevant in the context of indigenous communities, and of late, climate change and its impact on the ecosystems, services, the forest landscapes, the farming outcomes, and sort of the overall impact on the communities here. Next slide, please. So yeah, as I was saying, climate change is posing almost sort of a, I guess, existential threat to humanity, and particularly so for the rural and the marginalized and the vulnerable communities. And I would also say developing countries like ours is also sort of hardest hit from climate change related extreme weather and related disasters, and the consequences of all this on people and nature has been, I guess, particularly devastating. If you look at in the context of the NBR where we are based, and we have also been seeing, witnessing these sort of extreme multiple weather events of heavy rains and erratic unseasonal rains, flash floods and landslides, and increase in human-wildlife interactions, in complete habitats being taken over by, completely taken over by invasive species, loss of grasslands, drying up of springs. So all these are, things that we have been witnessing, which is sort of threatening the people and the wildlife, that call NBR this home. And this is particularly true so in the case of indigenous communities and even non-indigenous communities who are sort of facing these vulnerabilities in terms of income, food security, health, and overall well-being, which is sort of under threat now. And in addition to these, the external influences of markets and cultural influences, changing policies and weak governance, all of that sort of further amplifying the regional vulnerabilities that we see here in the landscape. And when you think about these kind of very complex and uncertain, sort of unexpected, externalities that the communities and the region is facing, we obviously have to sort of think about improved strategies to manage and protect these resources. And when we think about those sort of management strategies, it cannot be some sort of a sort of a singular or blanket approaches. Someone in the beginning talked about afforestation and and how much of it is how is it going to be a viable option, because you really have to think about the context and the habitat and the ecosystem that you're working on. So more than these sort of single one blanket sort of approaches, we should perhaps be thinking about more I guess integrated approaches, something that focuses not just on one of the ecosystem services. Say, for example, if you were just to focus on carbon sequestration, yes, from a climate change or climate mitigation point of view, perhaps it makes sense. But when you are working when you are looking at a landscape that is so interconnected, I think it makes sense to have more of an integrated approach and look at outcomes also sort of more diverse, and so it's not just single ecosystem services that you're looking at, but also hydrological services, biodiversity services, what else? The cultural services that these ecosystems are providing. All of this sort of leads to sort of recognizing this interdependent and coupled processes that requests or requires us to, sort of create multi-benefit, cost-effective solutions. And when you think about those solutions, obviously the first thing that comes to mind is the nature-based solutions. Next slide, please. Yeah, these are just some photographs just to, sort of showing you the, and also some news reports just showing you this kind of impacts that these communities and the landscape has been witnessing in the last couple of years, like massive landslides and loss of, housing. And the next slide also, please, if you could go to. We can just rush through this. The next slide, please. Yeah, these are just some photographs of farmers on their landscape in different parts of the NBR. I've taken some photographs from the Nilgiris as well as from Wayanad, which are all part of the North Wayanad, which is all part of the NBR. And what you see here is, these farmers, facing extreme sort of threats because of climate change, and they work in such challenging circumstances. And these are not easy terrains to work on, very close to the forest, rain-fed regions, water-stressed regions, constant conflict with wildlife, and so on. And therefore, it's not so much of a stretch to sort of think that that climate change will only sort of exacerbate these threats by, reducing the resilience of these natural landscapes and the people residing in it. And therefore, to sort of tackle these issues, we have to think about, as I said earlier, multi-benefit, but cost-effective solutions. And in that context, nature-based solutions geared more towards ecosystem-based adaptation, climate adaptation, improved resilience in the region is perhaps the way to go. And that's what we are trying here at Keystone as well with the communities we work with. So if you could please go to the next slide. The next slide, please. Yeah, let's be here. I kind of touched upon the previous slide, which is why, no, we can go to the next one, please. Yeah, the framework. Yeah, no, can you go to the framework, not the conclusion, the previous one? Sorry, my apology. So yeah, as I was saying, so when you think about nature-based solutions, the way we sort of understand is also, a definition by IUC, and someone else had also presented it, and basically leveraging the nature and power of healthy ecosystems to protect and safeguard a very sort of a stable, biodiverse environment and future for the communities residing on these landscapes. And so based on this definition, what we have been attempting to do is to employ, different sets of nature-based solutions to tackle climate change threats while aiming for this broader well-being outcome for people. As again, somebody in the beginning talked about how we shouldn't be just emotionally invested in thinking about nature-based conservation, but also think about the social dimension and the communities who are also part of this ecosystem. And therefore, well-being becomes sort of by default an important outcome to sort of pursue for us. And some of the interventions that we've been trying here is sort of, or actively supporting and promoting, has been agroforestry-based production systems, where we are promoting sort of resilient crops like millets, climate-resilient crops like millets, trees that are that ensure more, that can withhold more soil and water retention, and thereby improving the resilience of the farm, improving the productivity of the farm, wetland and forest patch restoration that sort of acts as these important carbon sequestering spaces, basically carbon sinks, which contributes to climate mitigation, water resource assessment and development of water security plan, which acts as an important climate adaptation approach, biodiversity monitoring, invasive species management, creation of forest gardens, beekeeping, all of these, sort of as key indicators of that talks to you about the resilience of the forest ecosystem and enhances the ecosystem and thereby kind of leads to improved forest resilience and climate adaptation. Now, you must be thinking what this fancy looking sort of framework is about, but I guess, when we have been applying these different nature-based solutions, all this is being done through just ground implementation. And although we consider these nature-based solutions, we are also very keen to build more evidence to evaluate the outcomes of these solutions. Now, again, I see all of you, the presenters before me had shown some very interesting case studies of specific examples of nature-based solutions and the kind of outcomes that it has been able to generate. But again, looking at it more from an integrated perspective, from an ecosystem-based perspective, I sometimes think that perhaps we need sort of a combination of nature-based solutions to be able to address a lot of these ecological challenges that we are facing. And so if that's the case, then how can we build sort of evidences to evaluate outcomes of these solutions? Now, much of the knowledge that are embedded in many of these solutions rest with the local communities. It is very much, dependent on traditional knowledges. But however, considering the kind of complex challenges that, climate change, the kind of uncertainties that we are faced with when it comes to climate change, and yeah, as I said, the complexity of the problem is so that I wonder whether just relying on traditional knowledge would really help us. So can we think of some sort of perhaps what we require is some sort of a hybrid co-creation of hybrid forms of knowledge that incorporates traditional knowledge with scientific evidences and scientific knowledge, and using that sort of hybrid knowledges to sort of innovate and fine-tune nature-based solutions towards improved climate resilience. And with that sort of a thought in mind, we sort of developed this theory of change framework that kind of recognizes the interdependent nature of various socio-ecological processes. The framework, if I can sort of run you through that. On top, you have the different pillars of ecosystem services, which are basically seen as the pillars of resilience. In next level, you have the processes as the response variables that gets impacted by climate change. And in the third level, you have the indicators, the measurable indicators that kind of represent the state of the ecosystem variable. And this sort of layered characterization of climate resilience, we think, is expected to enable more effective monitoring and assessment of nature-based solutions, planning and implementation towards desired outcomes. So you have the nature-based solutions at the bottom. You're trying it out, but then how does it sort of contribute to strengthening these different pillars of ecosystem services, eventually sort of reaching you or taking you to that final goal of climate resilience and climate adaptation or climate mitigation even. Next slide, please. Yeah. So I guess this is my last slide, and I think I just want to sort of wrap up by leading with some sort of concluding thoughts and suggestions more than recommendations. I think we do have the sort of a conceptual framework in place. Nevertheless, I feel that especially working in this landscape with the kind of complexity that you see in the landscape, the sociological and the ecological complexities, I feel that I think. Yes, we have a conceptual framework in place, but I feel more of a systematic assessment of monitoring and planning is required to develop more sustainable strategies for climate change adaptation and resilience. And to do that, I guess first we should sort of begin with a stakeholder-driven, very contextually relevant shared definition and framework of climate resilience. When we talk about these terminologies, climate resilience, climate adaptation, climate mitigation, we sort of tend to think more general, and I feel that it has to be more specific and contextual, and it has to start with defining it, what we mean by that together at that particular level. So here also, it's sort of an interesting point about scale here, so when we talk about scale, are we talking about scale, something that is like a cookie cutter solution that can be implemented across, or are we looking at it, or should we be looking at it in a more micro context specific level? So these are some of the questions that we have to sort of think about when we are also thinking about nature-based solutions and scaling up. I feel by doing this sort of a co-production of defining climate resilience, that's the beginning, we will allow us to build sort of partnerships and collaborations for effectively developing and promoting and implementing nature-based solutions. Because there are too many stakeholders involved. It's not just the community, it's not just the policymakers, it's not just the climate scientists, but it's also the corporates. It's multiple things that are in play here, multiple stakeholders are in play here. So the more collaborative we become, I guess, the more possibility of effective solutions can also sort of evolve out of it. And once you have these things in place, then the framework would make sense. The framework would then come in, and we can start sort of monitoring and assessing the different the outcomes of these nature-based solutions. To what extent are these contributing to mitigation and resilience in the way that we have defined it for that particular landscape? So that was one point. Another important point I want to also sort of emphasize is that lasting success for nature-based climate solutions requires that both the natural and the social sides of the problems be addressed. And this, I already talked about it, about looking at both the sociological and the ecological components. But then in this particular context, I'm also referring to the ethical dimensions of climate change, things like climate justice at whether it is at the global scale with developed countries versus non-developing nations, or whether it is at the local scale where you're thinking about marginalized, vulnerable communities versus the rich and the affluent. Who are the decision makers? Whose inputs are we really taking? So these are some of the ethical dimensions that I think we need to sort of not lose sight of. There's also the gender dimension, right? Which is very relevant in the context that I'm working, where women bear the biggest burden in terms of ensuring water security for their livelihood, for their households, in terms of ensuring agricultural labor, in terms of engaging in forest product, collection of forest products, processing it and marketing it. And there's also ample evidence that shows that if women are given the sort of the access to resources and have the capacity to sort of, or if their constraints are addressed, then there is a higher chance of not only improving her own well-being, but also the well-being of the household. So, that gendered lens is also very important, and we need to sort of factor in those things as well. So in short, we have to sort of summarizing it, we have to sort of invest in developing more inclusive, more gender sensitive, cohesive, adaptive, integrated landscape level plans, factoring in diverse governance arrangements, and ensuring that the implementation is done more collaboratively. And this collaboration is in terms of where you are, the space, the people, the intellectual inputs, and also resources both in terms of in-kind resources and also financial resources, which is also very important in really getting these things off the ground and making a difference. Yeah, that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jyotsna Krishna Kumar, for that tour de force. Literally, it was also answering many questions that were raised in the beginning that were directed to Dr. Anil Gupta as well. So thank you for also touching upon various issues which have so far not been addressed as much, about climate justice, gender sensitive programming, and also issues of access, about stakeholder-driven co-production of knowledge, and all these issues which are critical to nature-based solutions. If it's okay, in the interest of time, can we take questions for you after Mr. Jyotish Talukdar's presentation as well? Then we come back to you because we are already over time, and if that's okay. And I see that there is clearly interest in your presentation, which you would probably like to share with some of the participants as well. So I would like to now invite Jyotish Talukdar to share his presentation. and then we come back to questions for all the participants and also specifically for Dr. Jyotsna and Jyotish later on. Yeah, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Good afternoon, everyone. At first, I would like to convey my sincere thanks and gratitude to the organizer to organize this type of wonderful dialogue series and also invite me as a speaker. I think someone will share my screen. Yes. Learnings from sustainable and climate resilient aquaculture models. My topics is learnings from sustainable and climate resilience aquaculture model on climate dialogue series on natural based solution and climate programs. These are the major issues in the context of Assam and nearby parts of the Northeast regions. Climate change issues, high rainfall, extreme weather events now becoming common, frequent floods, and these leading to destructions of our natural resources and as well as aquaculture-based livelihood. Because we are working last 15 years on the aquaculture, so definitely I would like to say on aquaculture-based livelihood. Before going to what a process we have done to reduce these issues, just I want to give 1 minute to say about our organizations. Kalankapili, our motto is opening avenues to opportunities, and we are the brand ambassador of Department of Fisheries, Government of Assam. Please, next slide. Kalankapili, formed in 2007 in a particular village, Bogibari of Kamrup Metro districts by 7 local youth working primarily in sustainable aquacultures and also in agriculture, active in Assam and some parts of Arunachal Pradesh, have a staff strength of 35, empowering around 1 lakh families through sustainable aquaculture model, receive Best Society Award across the country. I think you might be aware that 21st November is celebrated as a World Fisheries Day, and last year we received this award from our Honorable Minister Fisheries, Sri Purushottam Rupala sir. And we are also brand ambassador of Department of Fisheries. Recently, I have been nominated as a member of EPEDA, Government of India. Next slide. Approaches to address the challenges. Improve package of practices. We worked on package of practices. We work institutional development and community empowerment and convergence. These are the 3 basics approaches which we try to resolve the climate issues. Next slide. Improve package of practices. The components which are under improve package of practices are especially in introductions of improved fish varieties. You know that it might be known that the fish stay in a pond in 3 layers, upper, middle, and bottom. You know that in bottom layer, they are in our earlier days, our farmers used in common carp. That is not good for the fish pond, because common carp have a character to creations of siltations in the pond. So we reduce that type of varieties and we include some good improved varieties like freshwater prawns also included, first of its kind in Northeast regions under some NRM program. Design and construction of fish pond. It will also help to help the climate related issues. Quality seed productions using low-lying areas. In Assam, there is lots of low-lying area, and they are the major source for frequent floods. And by developing low-lying area through clusters, we try to resolve that problem. Focus on natural feed. We also focused on natural as well as conventional feed. because you know that nowadays in the aquaculture sectors, one problem is going on regarding on supplementary feed, because nowadays farmers are using huge amount of supplementary feed, and that is not good for our ecosystem. So we always focus on natural feed and conventional feed. Resource savings, we also focus on resource savings in the sense to minimize our input cost by using our organic materials like cow dung, spita of pig. Sustainable harvesting practices, and also hygienic storage and marketing. Next slide, please. These are the varieties. Jointy rohu, this is an improved variety developed by ICR SIFA. Freshwater pond, the freshwater common carp was replaced by freshwater pond. This freshwater pond do not have the characters which have in common carp. Second row of the left slide is low-lying area. There are lots of low-lying area in Assam and some parts of Northeast. We converted this low-lying area into the clusters. And this is a scientific pond design and constructions. If you use this model, it will help also help to solve our issues, climate-related issues. Next slide. Yes. After that, we thought on institutional development and community empowerment. And for institutional development and community empowerment, we work especially on aquaculture cluster development. We developed lots of aquaculture cluster developed by NRM program. There was one GIZ and NABARD supported program was there. It was called UPNRM, Apnera Program for Natural Resource Management. Under this program, we developed 30 ponds in a cluster to see that developments bank came forward. And today I'm happy to inform you that within 1 kilometer radius, now there are 200 fish ponds in a cluster approach. Earlier, this area was affected by flood. Now, this area have no any flood related issue. Even they are getting good amount to using sustainable aquaculture model, and now they are using the fish pond as a ATM. When they need money, they call the buyers and they came and they harvested the fish, and on the embankment he took the money, and that is the system is going on in our clusters. We also developed FPO in aquaculture, development of CRP in aquaculture. Till now we have developed 320 CRP. CRP means community resource persons in aquaculture, because aquaculture is one of the sectors by which we can solve climate related issues. So we focused on that, because everyone should know, everyone means our farmers should know, especially on sustainable aquaculture model. They have to follow the sustainable aquaculture model. To do this, we have developed CRP. We have a training manual of 3 days and 10 days. After that, they will develop a cluster having the 15 to 20 farmers, and they share their knowledge. They disseminate their knowledge to the group, and thus we are able to cover around 6,000 farmers in the area Northeast regions. Residential training facilities, we have a good residential training facilities by which we can train the farmers, especially on sustainable aquaculture model. Demonstration unit, we have demonstration unit. Standard training module, we have standard training module. Nowadays the other states also follow our standard training module. Qualified resource person, we have both internal and external qualified resource person, especially on sustainable aquaculture. Next slide, please. Yes, there are some in our training module. We keep at least 70% hands-on training and 30% for classroom training. We believe that it will help to get more knowledge about sustainable aquaculture. First slide is hands-on training during the time of hands-on training. Second slide of first row is classroom training, and after that, in the second row, if you see the left slide, this is our low-cost training dormitory where our participants can stay. And in the second row of the right slide, also a hands-on training. especially for the farmers. Convergence. Convergence, we have also a fruitful tie-up with various stakeholders by which we can able to convergence in our existing programs. So basically in the convergence, what we did facilitating credit support for farmers from banks. Today I'll be very happy to inform you that before starting our organization in 2007, I was visited 15 days for 15,000 loan in a bank. But in that time, I was a refused person from bank, but we did not lost my energy, my focus. In that time, I thought that this was not a problem for me. Already more youth and women already face this problem. And for many other, this problem is waiting for them. So basically on basis on that, this was our circumstances by which we formed Kolonkopili. And one day we are not able to get 15,000 loan, but today we are able to provide above 20 crore loan to unemployed youth and women for sustainable aquaculture. Facilitating route connectivity through MGNREGA and other schemes. When we developed that cluster, there are lots of problems, especially on route connectivity. So we tried to resolve this problem by using MGNREGA schemes. And also, you know that there are some lots of schemes in NABARD also. There is one scheme in RIPF, Rural Infrastructure Promotion Fund. For that, we can also develop route. We develop this type. We use these types of schemes to develop the route in our clusters. Extension of irrigation canal. Because you know that there are lots of river in Assam, so we tried to develop or extension irrigation canal by which, because you will be happy to know that the development or extension of irrigation canals not only help in the paddy field but also help to get the more production by the fish farmers, because when there is a need in water, impact community level, higher standard of living, empowerment of youth and women, reduce migrations, improve aquaculture model provides better financial returns for farmers. These are the impact in community level. Next slide. I think we have missed one point in my earlier slide. Yes. Support plenty extension of irrigation canal. I was talking on extension and development of irrigation canal. It will not only help in paddy field, it also help in our sustainable aquaculture practices also. Because when we need water in the pond, then we use the irrigation canal, and at the same time, when we have to let the water out, then we used also same irrigation canal, and this water goes to the paddy field, because you know that the pond water is a very fertile. In that case, the water also help in the paddy field also. Support plantations from Department of Horticulture and Forest. In our cluster, we also, there are extensive plantation is going on by the help of Horticulture and Forest Department. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yes. Impact. What we did for improve package of practice. We did for institutional development and community development. We did convergence. After that, we have seen lots of impact in various categories, various levels. First level is community level. In community level, it is found that higher standards of living, empowerment of youth and women, reduce migrations. Earlier in the areas, they went out from other states to get the money, to get the works, but get the employment. But now they came back and they are engaged in their area with the sustainable aquaculture model. Improved aquaculture model provides better financial return for our farmers. Nowadays, our farmers are getting more income in the previous days. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Please just give me 1 second.
Yes, impact on environmental. Wasteland converted to the productive purposes. Earlier, the low-lying area was considered as a wasteland. Now the wasteland become a productive purpose. And development of pond clusters, it will help to research the groundwater. So groundwater research due to creation of pond, reduction of soil erosions, and reduced impact of floods. These are the environmental impact which was seen in our areas. And next slide, please. Impact state level. Based on Kolonkopolis experience, bankable model schemes was developed and influenced bank schemes by aquaculture farmers. So I already told you that I was a one-day recused person from bank. Now the bank came forward to give credit support, especially in sustainable aquaculture model. And I am also happy that in our 20 crore credit to the unemployment youth and women, till now, bank did not get not one NPA also. Government of Assam developed a prawn hatchery, prawn seed hatchery, because under NRM scheme, freshwater prawn culture was developed in Assam. So after see the development of this species, so government of Assam developed a prawn seed hatchery, and not only develop a prawn seed hatchery, also government of Assam included improved aquaculture activity into APART and RKWeb schemes. They included all the sustainable aquaculture model included in their APART and other government schemes. Tie up with Assam Administrative Staff College for capacity building on aquaculture-based livelihood models. You know that in Assam there is Assam Administrative Staff College, and they trained the civil service officials who are later posted in as a block development officer or circle officer or subdivisional officers. In their course of training, there is a provisions for 1 day or 2 day exposure visit. They came to know, to see our clusters, and this is also help to replicate this model other parts of this Assams. And next slide, please. Impact regional level. Develop aquaculture field school for Northeast regions. Today, I'll be happy to inform you that we developed one integrated aquaculture center in Bogibari under Kamrup Metro districts. Later, this center was recognized by ICR SIFA as an aquaculture field school for the first of its kind in Northeast regions. Now, this is the only aquaculture field school in Northeast regions, and not only Assam but also from other states of Northeast regions. Lots of farmers came to our aquaculture field schools, and then they want to know about what is sustainable aquaculture, and we are also promoting sustainable aquaculture through our aquaculture field school to the other farmers of the Northeast regions. Develop integrated and advanced aquaculture models. We have integrated an advanced aquaculture model, and nowadays this integrated and advanced aquaculture model also has been replicated other parts of our Northeast region. Especially we are replicating this model in Arunachal Pradesh and Nagaland also. Created a pool of community resource persons for aquaculture. Already I told about the community resource person. This is a very new things. First time across the country, community resource persons in fisheries was developed by Kolonkopli and GIZ, and nurtured sustainable and climate resilient communities. And definitely, I will be happy to say that we have a fruitful tie-ups with various stakeholders. And next slide, please. I think, thanks. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Jyotish, for that insight into local initiatives, especially relating to sustainable aquaculture, which is such an important sector in India, and talking about various impacts at community level, ecological level, and also kind of scaling up further to the region itself, which is very important as part of various nature-based solutions that can be implemented in Northeast. So thank you so much. We have completely run out of time. And two of our speakers have in fact left because they had other pre-scheduled meetings. So unfortunately, Dr. Anil Gupta and Dr. Chandra, both of them had to leave. They sent me messages that unfortunately they couldn't stay longer. However, we have the other speakers, and as I mentioned, we will take questions for Dr. Jyotsna and Jyotish both at this stage, and also for the other speakers after that. So can we have questions, if there are any, which are directed at Dr. Jyotsna, first of all? Anybody who would like to ask a question, please raise your hand, or if you would like to type out the question, that's also welcome. Okay, I don't see any raised hands, but I saw that there is one question which I think you will be able to handle it best, and that is from Ajita Tiwari, and it is about multiple challenges to adopting nature-based solutions, and she has posted it in the comments. So in terms of the challenges, she mentions, for instance, some of it you already did address in your presentation about knowledge asymmetry, about taxonomy, about effective project designs, demand side engagement, standards and measurable metrics. And all these things also create challenges when it comes to implementing or scaling up, or any other kind of ways in which these can be made more effective. These solutions can be more effective. So what, according to you, should be our next steps to build out this discourse and action? I believe you have addressed some of it already in your presentation, but if you would like to just maybe expand a little bit upon it further. Could you unmute yourself, Dr. Jyotsna?
Mute. Yes, I'm on mute. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I mean, I wish there was a quick answer and a quick solution to the challenge, because it's such a, because the problem itself, the challenges that we are facing is also very complicated, right? It's not just that you have a problem and you have multiple variables influencing the problem. It is also these variables are also interconnected and interlinked and all of that. So it's a very messy sort of a problem that we are trying to sort of address, especially when we're looking at from a habitat or an ecosystem point of view, or a landscape point of view, and there are just multiple stakeholders involved in all the process in terms of decision making. Well, not all the stakeholders are involved in decision making. There is there are the voiceless as well, and whose opinions and inputs never get really addressed or taken seriously, for that matter. So I think one sort of a very pragmatic way, and I don't know if it's naive to think that way, but this question of scale, I always keep coming back to this thing about scale, because everyone talks about scale, whether it is at the policy level, whether it is implementation level, whether it is the funders, they're all interested in this idea of scaling up. But for me, I'm always thinking that maybe we shouldn't be scaling up, we should be going inwards and focusing, and then perhaps looking at what models work and then trying to replicate it elsewhere. Replicate it, which are, again, not replicate as it is, but then because then that becomes sort of another form of scaling up, but replicating in a way that where you have taken some lessons and insights and sort of, again, tailoring it to that particular context. So these are some of the strategies, in a way, not quite solutions, but strategies perhaps that we can sort of think about when we design some of these nature-based solutions, and definitely has to be more collaborative, has to be more stakeholder-driven. These have become such, what do I say? These are just sort of words that we keep using, but I wish, we could really actually get these things done on the ground. So again, because of the complex nature of the problem, because of the uncertainties around the problem, because of the unknowns, it's like we are getting issues that we have never faced before. So then how do we sort of address some of these challenges? And looking back into traditional knowledge may not always fetch us the kind of answer that we are looking for. So in that's where I say, we need more hybrid forms of knowledge, perhaps, where it is a combination of nature, sort of traditional knowledge working together with science-based knowledge, and not quite separating them and being only nature-driven, only focusing on traditional knowledge and only focusing on science-driven knowledge, but a sort of a combination of that. Yeah, I'm sorry, this is sort of the long-winded answer I could give. Not a very, again, yeah. I hope that
Absolutely. That was a broad question as well, covering so many different aspects of nature-based solutions. So thank you for trying to, connect them all up and trying to see how it can all be integrated into this model that you also presented in your talk. Okay. Any questions for Jyotish before we just open it up for the entire panel? I don't see any hands raised, but again, there is one question I think from the comments section, which I think you will be able to take up, particularly in relation to the initiative that you presented about. And this question is about, it's from Bhavya George, and the question is about the readiness and awareness which exists at different levels of governance. And particularly, she has mentioned the role of panchayats and other relevant line agencies. So what is your experience of, probably talking about whether these governments, local governments, panchayats and other relevant line agencies are they ready, and what is the level of awareness when it comes to nature-based solutions?
Yes, really, you have asked a very good questions. But at first, they have to know, panchayat level and government level, at first they have to know what is sustainable aquaculture. If at first they know about the sustainable aquaculture, and if they give interest, then it will be very easy effort by which we can replicate the model in a very long way. So at first, but my humble request is that at first they should know about the sustainable model.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Jyotish? Okay, I don't see any. Okay, now you can ask questions to any member of the panel, maybe one or two questions we can take up if that's fine. Okay, I don't see anybody.
I'm sorry, I'm Dipanjana. Again, just one thing, because I can see one important issue in the chat box also regarding the experience of continuum in NPS. So can we learn about it? Because Mr. Sarkar is,
sure.
If I am that he can really contribute to it.
Sure. Yeah, please go ahead, Dibyendu Sarkar, if you can unmute yourself and just talk about it.
Yes, this is basically, I used to look after NADGA in West Bengal. So we started with BRLF and a group of civil society organizations in working in spring shade development in the Darjeeling Hills. So this is basically community participation and nature-based solutions to the problem of water scarcity in the hills of Darjeeling. So once we were there, we then decided that, okay, if this can work wonders in the hills, why not we go to the western part, another agroclimatic region, which is lateritic rain-fed area of the state. So there we started doing another kind of a project with, again, BRLF support and 7 civil organizations, which is known as Ushar Mukti, where basically the watershed approach was taken and nature-based solutions to create resilience in the community. Then again, once we succeeded there, we thought that if similar kind of things can be done even in the coastal areas of the state, that is the Sundarbans. So there we started the Panjali. So what I wanted to tell about what Jyotish, she was talking about, that okay, this can be some kind of a continuum, and it's not scale as such, but adapting to different contexts, different agroclimatic regions, how something can work at a place, and then a different model, to a certain extent tweak model, can work at another place, and then a third agroclimatic region. So that way probably we can think of nature-based solutions, and this is not scaling up, but at the same time this is putting things in a different perspective at different places. So that's basically I wanted to.
Actually, these applications of NBS in the spring shade in the hilly regions of Darjeeling, this East Kolkata conservation in the East Kolkata wetland management, managing the river floodplain, Sundarban, protecting the Sundarban. It has so many applications in West Bengal that we are very much interested to learn about it, and also to share our experience, whatever we have gathered from field. So that's why, I mean, thanks that time was very short. Still, you have given us. Thank you so much.
Maybe in another session we can contribute on this in a more detailed fashion. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing information and knowledge about your experience as well. I don't see any more questions, but some final thoughts, if there are any from our speakers, particularly Ms. Sujana Krishnamurthy, if you have anything more to add, or if you want to respond to any of the questions or comments that have been made so far.
No, absolutely right. Nothing at the moment, actually.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. And Sharath, Dr. Sharath, if you have anything to add, there's actually one question maybe which is targeted at you, which is about if there is any specific policy scheme that is available in India to fund startups for NBS in the agricultural sector. And this question is from Amit Das. Maybe some final thoughts on this from you. Yeah.
I don't think I can recollect anything on startups, NBS, and agriculture. Connecting these three, I can't think of any government policies. But there is quite a bit of focus from the national government on promoting natural farming on the similar lines of what is being done in Andhra Pradesh all over the country. So natural farming is different from organic farming. So yeah, I think if I remember correctly, the government has even the ICAR institutes have been asked to come up with proof and evidence for the natural farming success. But otherwise, yeah, I don't know anything regarding policy for encouraging startups in this area. Yeah, I think that's a good question, and I can look into it more.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much to all the speakers. So Jorge has also left the meeting. Yeah. Okay. Dr. Jyotsna, do you want to add something?
Response to that startup question, and I'm not saying I have an answer, but maybe it might be worth exploring, because I know Kerala government has something called the startup mission, and they've been doing a lot of innovative, supporting a lot of innovative startup ideas. So maybe digging through their website might lead you to some answer to that question. Yeah, just wanted to throw it out there. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Thank you. So yes, thank you to all the speakers. Jorge has also sent me a message saying he had to leave the meeting in between. So sorry that we could not have all the speakers by the end of the session, but it was a great learning experience, and so much of rich knowledge and experience at various levels, right? So in terms of analysis, in terms of knowledge sharing, in terms of practical experiences, this was one of the highlights of this particular dialogue itself, to talk about nature-based solutions at different levels itself. So thank you so much for everyone for participating in this dialogue. Now, may I invite Ritwajit from Chase India, the policy communication partner for the event, to share the formal vote of thanks.
Thank you, Dhanashri. First of all, to all the participants regarding the presentation and everything, uh, the end of this event, we are thinking about having 10 to 12 episode of climate, 10 episode of climate dialogue series. At the end of it, you will have all the presentation and all the materials, knowledge materials will be shared with you. So in case you want to reach out to a particular speaker, please let the team know. They will get back to you on this. So now getting into the VOT, first of all, I want to thank the Ministry, Deputy Secretary Ruchika Jal, ma'am, for her kind of participation. She is kind of anchoring the climate dialogue series for ministry and working closely with us. I want to thank the speakers who joined us from different time zones, and they brought such an extensive and highly valuable kind of commentary and insight to the discussion. To start with, Dr. Anil Kumar Gupta from NIDM, Dr. Chandra Silori from REC of TC, Dr. Sarath Kanapalli from ZIZ, Mr. Hore Matalana from FSC International, Ms. Sunjana Krishnamurthy from Under the Mango Tree Initiative, Dr. Josna Krishnakumar, Keystone Foundation, Mr. Jyotish Talukdar, Kalum Kapeli. Want to take a moment here. Like I have known a couple of them personally, like Dr. Anil Kumar Gupta, like the first time we interacted when I was interning with KFW, and he was talking about how nature should be at the center when how we should frame adaptation resilience strategy, and still the discussion is there, but we are reframing it and repackaging it. In RECOP-TC, Chandra Silori sir was used to, he formed around the FPIC, like free prior informed consent mandate and under RED Plus. So that was like a big body of work, and how to kind of like not to touch on Keystone Foundation, a great collaborator in community forestry initiative since a while. And thanks to Snehalata, we got Josna here and brought such an kind of value add to the overall discussion, and heard a lot about from on under the Mango Tree Initiative from the GIZ team, and glad to hear them out. And it was really great to learn all the initiative what they're doing. And Hore Matalana, FSC has taken it up to a next level. They are not talking about chain of custody, forest management. They are talking about the whole thing, forest for all, ecosystem for all. So this is going to be interesting how the corporate and market kind of like put a value on certification, and NBS is a part of it. And lastly, Kalong Kapeli, I have seen the project, and like we didn't had much visualization, but I tell you, it's one of the most fascinating fishery project in the world. So if you are traveling to Guwahati, you should meet Jyotish Talukdar and see the project, how wonderfully organized it is. And lastly, I want to thank Dr. Dhanashri Jairam, the moderator, who is also anchoring the Climate Dialogue series and been a part of a couple of episodes, and like joining us from Berlin, and also considering the time difference and all of that. And lastly, I want to thank the participants for taking time out and being with us for all this while. And also want to thank the ZIZ team for kind of like supporting the event. And lastly, the Chase and Avian team who are behind the scene, like there's a team which is working behind the scene and putting up this event together. And so this is it. And keep on watching on the space. Like we have a couple of more episodes to go, and the part of the endeavor is to present innovative new emergent topics and how to link it with like climate change policy and strategies that we are going to unlock in days to come. So thank you everyone, and have a good day, and we will be in touch. Thanks.